Today, we're going to cover some of the caving and cave diving disasters that we have covered on this channel. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. What if a fun adventure turned into a fight for survival? In 1979, 4 cavers entered the Natural Well Cave in Alabama, ready for excitement. But as they descended into the dark, a sudden storm unleashed chaos above. Water flooded the cave, trapping 2 of them inside. With no way out and danger closing in, how did they survive? What secrets does this cave hide? Join us as we unravel this chilling tale of mystery, courage, and rescue. We'll provide you with well-researched information. If you want to support us, please take 1 second to click subscribe. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories to your fingertips. Caves. Welcome to our cave exploration adventure. Caves are natural spaces or voids beneath the Earth's surface, formed over thousands or even millions of years. They come in all shapes and sizes, from small openings to massive underground systems. Whether you're a curious beginner or an experienced explorer, caves offer a unique glimpse into the hidden wonders of our planet. Let's explore what makes caves so special. Caves are natural holes or tunnels in the ground. Some caves are small and shallow, while others are deep and complex, stretching far underground. Caves that are deeper than they are wide are called endogene caves, while smaller, shorter caves are known as exogene caves. These underground spaces are formed through a variety of natural processes, such as the weathering of rocks, erosion by water, and even the movement of tectonic plates. The process of cave formation is called speleogenesis. It can take millions of years for a cave to form. One of the most common ways caves are created is through the dissolution of limestone. Rainwater, which is slightly acidic, seeps into the ground and dissolves the limestone over time, creating tunnels and chambers. Other caves are formed by volcanic activity, erosion, or even the action of microorganisms. Caves can also be classified as active or relict. Active caves have water flowing through them, like rivers or streams. These include inflow caves, where water enters, outflow caves, where water exits, and through caves, where water flows from one end to the other. Relict caves, on the other hand, no longer have flowing water, but may still contain pools or lakes. Caves can't be more than about 3,000 meters deep because the pressure from the rocks above becomes too great. However, the depth of a cave is measured from its highest entrance to its lowest point. This means that some caves can still be very deep, depending on the landscape above them. For example, caves formed in limestone, called karst caves, have a depth limit based on how deep the limestone layer goes. Introduction to Natural Well Cave. Today, we're taking you to one of the most fascinating and challenging cave in Huntsville, Alabama, the Natural Well Cave. Nestled on Montesano Mountain, this cave is not only a hiker's paradise, but also a testament to the raw power of nature. Whether you're a seasoned explorer or just love the outdoors, Natural Well Cave offers a mix of beauty, mystery, and adventure. Let's dive into what makes this place so special. The journey begins at the Land Trust Hikers parking lot, located off Montesano Boulevard. This gravel parking lot is easy to find, about a 10-minute drive from downtown Huntsville. Look for the small brown sign that says Hikers Parking Lot. From here, you can access several trails, including the Natural Well Trail, Arrowhead Trail, and Trough Springs Trail. Follow the signs pointing you toward the Natural Well Trail, and you're on your way. The Natural Well Trail is just over 2 miles long, starting from the parking lot and ending at McKay Hollow. The trail begins as a single-track path, wide enough for one person, and then expands into a double-track trail. The first half-mile is relatively easy, with few rocks or roots to worry about. However, you'll need to climb over or crawl under a few fallen trees, a reminder that nature is always in charge. Around the half-mile mark, you'll encounter a massive washout caused by erosion. This area is a striking example of how powerful storms and landslides can reshape the landscape. The washout is about 100 feet wide, with fallen trees scattered like pickup sticks. Crossing this section requires some scrambling over rocks and debris, so be careful. The erosion has even reached close to the Arrowhead Trail, and you can see it on Google Maps. It's a challenging part of the hike, but it adds to the adventure. After navigating the washout, the trail continues to the highlight of the hike, the Natural Well. Around the 1.75-mile mark, you'll reach this incredible natural feature. The Natural Well is a vertical shaft cave, about 150 feet deep, nestled next to a high cliff wall. For safety, the well is surrounded by a sturdy fence. Trust me, you'll be glad it's there. It's a little scary to even peek over the edge. Huntsville was once known as the Cave City before it became the Rocket City, and the natural well is a perfect example of why. This geological wonder was formed over thousands of years by the slow, persistent work of water. It's a must-see for anyone interested in caves or natural history. Beyond the natural well, the trail becomes more challenging. You'll encounter steep, rocky declines and some washed-out sections. This part of the trail is very technical, so take your time and watch your step. Along the way, you'll also pass a beautiful waterfall, which you'll cross twice. If it's dry, this spot is perfect for a quick break, a selfie, or even a picnic. As you continue, the trail eventually opens up into McKay Hollow, a wide, scenic area where the trail merges with the Arrowhead Trail. From here, it's a short climb to the end of the trail, where it connects with the McKay Hollow Trail. The natural well is a perfect example of how water shapes our world. In one part of you see the destructive power of water through landslides and erosion. In another, you witness the slow, patient work of water creating the natural well itself. It's a cave that combines adventure, beauty, and a little bit of mystery. On September 1st, 1979, 4 young cavers from Indiana embarked on what was supposed to be an exciting adventure into the Natural Well Cave in Huntsville, Alabama. Little did they know, their trip would turn into a life-threatening ordeal, testing their courage, teamwork, and the skills of local rescuers. This is the story of their journey, the dangers they faced, and the incredible rescue that brought them back to safety. The group consisted of 4 friends: Brian Finnegan, Jim Gaskell, Mark Koselke, and George Sesnick, all around 25 years old. Brian and Jim were experienced cavers, having explored many caves before. Mark and George, however, had only been caving for about 6 months. While they had some experience with vertical caves, they were still relatively new to the sport. Despite their varying levels of experience, the group was excited about their trip to Natural Well Cave, a famous vertical cave known for its 180 feet deep entrance pit. The cavers had driven all night from Indiana to reach Huntsville. They were tired, having not slept, and had not brought any food with them. Their clothing was simple: jeans, t-shirts, and 1 extra dry shirt each. They carried basic caving gear, including ropes and harnesses for rappelling into the cave. While they were prepared for the adventure, they hadn't anticipated the challenges that lay ahead. The adventure begins. The group arrived at the Natural Well Cave entrance in the afternoon. The weather was calm, and the cavers were excited to explore. The entrance to the cave is a massive vertical pit, 180 feet deep, with 2 normally dry streams leading into it. Below the pit, the cave opens into a large horizontal passage with a constant temperature of 57 degrees Fahrenheit. The cave is known for being safe, as it never floods under normal conditions. The cavers rigged their ropes and began rappelling into the pit one by one. The descent was thrilling, with the cool air of the cave contrasting with the warm September weather outside. Once inside, they explored the horizontal passage, marveling at the cave's natural beauty. The trip was meant to be a quick exploration, and by 6 p.m., Brian Finnegan began his ascent back to the surface. As Brian Finnegan started climbing out of the Natural Well Cave, the weather outside suddenly changed. The day, which had been calm and clear, quickly became terrible. Dark clouds appeared, and a strong thunderstorm began. Heavy rain started to pour down, soaking everything. The peaceful streams near the cave, which were usually dry, suddenly filled with water. In just a few minutes, they turned into raging rivers, rushing with water, rocks, and pieces of broken trees and other debris. Jim Gaskell, the second caver, followed Brian out of the cave. By the time Jim reached the surface, the rain was falling so hard that it was difficult to see. The 2 streams that fed into the cave were now flooding the entrance pit with a dangerous mix of water and debris. The cave, which was normally dry and safe, had become a deadly trap. At the same time, Mark Koselke and George Sesnick were still inside the cave. As the storm raged outside, they realized they were in big trouble. The water rushing into the cave meant they couldn't climb back up the ropes to the surface. The water was so powerful it could have swept them away or knocked them off the ropes. They knew they had to find a safe place to wait until the storm passed. Mark and George found a small, flat area about 12 feet above the cave floor. This was their only chance to survive. They climbed onto it and huddled together, trying to stay out of the rushing water. The cave, which had been quiet and peaceful just a short time before, was now filled with the very loud sound of water crashing against the walls. Rocks and pieces of broken trees and other debris tumbled down the cave, making it even more dangerous. Mark and George were trapped inside the cold, dark cave, with water rising all around them. The temperature inside the cave was a chilly 57 degrees Fahrenheit, 14 degrees Celsius, and their wet clothes made them feel even colder. They had no food to eat and no extra clothing to keep warm. The sound of the rushing water and falling rocks was loud and terrifying, adding to their fear. Outside, Brian and Jim tried to shout to their friends, but the noise of the storm and the crashing water made it impossible to hear anything. Mark and George were in a very dangerous situation. The water in the cave was rising quickly, and they had no way to climb out. The ledge they were standing on was their only safe spot, but even that didn't feel completely secure. The cold was making it hard for them to stay warm, and the constant noise of the storm was overwhelming. They didn't know how long they could hold on. Outside, Brian and Jim realized they needed to act fast. They knew they couldn't save Mark and George on their own, so they decided to go for help. They ran through the heavy rain to the nearest house, where they could use a phone to call for assistance. Brian and Jim contacted several emergency services to explain the situation. They called the Huntsville Police, the State Park Rangers, the Madison County Rescue Squad, and the EMSI Ambulance Service. By 7:15 p.m., the Huntsville Cave Rescue Unit was alerted and a full-scale rescue operation began. The rescue effort. The rescuers knew they had to work quickly. The heavy rain continued to fall, making the rescue operation even more difficult. The rescuers arrived at the scene by 7:30 p.m. and quickly assessed the situation. They knew they had to act fast to save Mark and George, who were still trapped inside the cave. The storm showed no signs of stopping, and the water flowing into the cave was making it harder to reach the stranded cavers. The rescuers split into two teams to tackle the problem. The first team worked on diverting the streams that were flooding the cave. They used tools and equipment to redirect the water away from the cave entrance. This was a tough job because the rain was still pouring down, and the ground was slippery and muddy. The second team focused on preparing to extract Mark and George from the cave. They gathered ropes, harnesses, and other gear needed for the rescue. They also requested wetsuits and warm clothes to help the rescuers and the trapped cavers stay warm in the cold, wet conditions. By 9:30 p.m., the efforts to divert the water had started to work. The flow of water into the cave had decreased enough for one of the rescuers, Carl Craig, to descend into the cave. Carl decided to go down without a wetsuit to save time. He carried a space blanket to provide warmth for Mark and George, who had been stuck in the cold cave for hours. Carl carefully made his way down the slippery, debris-filled pit. When he reached the ledge where Mark and George were waiting, he found them cold, wet, and shaken, but otherwise unharmed. Carl wrapped them in the space blanket to help them stay warm and checked to make sure they were okay. Once Carl confirmed that Mark and George were safe, he signaled to the rescuers on the surface. This was a moment of relief for everyone involved. The rescuers knew that Mark and George were alive and that the rescue operation was on the right track. It gave them the hope and motivation they needed to continue their efforts. By 10 p.m., the water flow into the cave had reduced even more, making it safer for the rescuers to bring Mark and George out. The rescue team prepared to pull up the two cavers out of the cave one by one. To make the process smoother, they lowered a National Guard field telephone into the cave. This special phone allowed the rescuers inside the cave to communicate directly with the team on the surface. It was a crucial tool that helped speed up the rescue and ensured everyone stayed coordinated. Mark was the first to be pulled out of the cave. The rescuers carefully attached him to a rope and began pulling him up. The ascent was slow and challenging because the cave walls were slippery and the pit was filled with debris from the storm. The rescuers had to work carefully to make sure Mark didn't get hurt during the climb. As Mark was pulled up, everyone on the surface held their breath, hoping the operation would go smoothly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mark reached the top. He was cold, wet, and exhausted, but he was safe. The rescuers quickly wrapped him in warm blankets and checked his condition. Once Mark was safely on the surface, it was George's turn. The rescuers repeated the same careful process, attaching George to the rope and slowly pulling him up. Just like with Mark, the climb was slow and difficult due to the slippery walls and debris, but the rescuers worked together and soon George was also out of the cave. When George reached the surface, he was greeted with relief and joy. Like Mark, he was cold and tired, but he was unharmed. The rescuers gave him warm clothes and blankets to help him recover from the cold. By 10:30 p.m., the entire rescue operation was complete. Mark and George were both safe, and the rescuers could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The storm was still raging, but the worst was over. The teamwork and determination of the rescuers had paid off, and everyone was grateful that the ordeal had ended without any serious injuries. Mark and George were taken to a nearby hospital where they could get medical treatment. They were checked by doctors and treated for hypothermia, but both were not physically injured. The experience had been terrifying, but they were alive and safe thanks to the brave efforts of the rescuers. Conclusion. The cavers in this story were prepared for normal conditions, but they didn't anticipate the sudden storm that turned their adventure into a life-threatening situation. This incident serves as an important reminder. When exploring caves, especially those that could flood, it's crucial to check the weather forecast before heading out. If there's even a chance of thunderstorms or heavy rain, it's best to cancel the trip and wait for safer conditions. Caving is an exciting and rewarding activity, but it comes with risks. Being aware of the weather, having the right gear, and knowing what to do in an emergency can make all the difference. Always respect the power of nature and prioritize safety above all else.
What does it feel like to be lost in complete darkness, surrounded by cold, dripping walls, with no idea which way leads to safety? This is the chilling story of 3 experienced cavers who entered the depths of Sloan's Valley Cave late one night. What began as an exciting adventure quickly turned into a fight for survival when one of them, Tony Hughes, made a fateful decision that left him alone, lost, and desperate in the pitch-black maze. What went wrong? What happened to Tony? Stay with us as we unravel this mysterious and harrowing tale. Nestled in the beautiful and remote Appalachian foothills of southeastern Kentucky, Sloan's Valley Cave is a true hidden gem for explorers and nature lovers. Located near the Cumberland River, this cave system stretches over 24.6 miles, making it one of the longest caves in Kentucky and among the top 100 longest caves in the world. The cave is just a short drive south of Burnside, Kentucky, off U.S. Highway 27, and lies between Somerset, the last major city in the area, and Knoxville, Tennessee. Surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills, Sloan's Valley Cave offers a unique underground adventure that showcases the beauty and history of the region. Sloan's Valley Cave is not only impressive for its size, but also for its fascinating geology. The cave is formed in Mississippian limestone, specifically the St. Genevieve and St. Louis layers of the Slade Formation. This gives the cave its stunning rock formations and unique features such as the Big Room, one of the largest underground chambers in Kentucky. The Big Room measures a jaw-dropping 750 feet in length, 130 feet in width, and 90 feet in height, an awe-inspiring sight for anyone lucky enough to visit. With at least 16 known entrances scattered across the area, the cave system is accessible from various points. One of the most famous entrances is the Great Rock Sink, a dramatic karst window with towering limestone walls up to 80 feet tall. This natural sinkhole features 2 main entrances into the cave. The larger West Cave entrance, which is 50 feet wide and 15 feet tall, and the smaller East Cave entrance, which leads to a series of once flooded chambers. Sloan's Valley Cave is steeped in history. Early explorers and settlers were drawn to its vast chambers and unique features. In one section of the cave, near what was once the Cumberland River entrance, the remains of saltpeter mining operations have been found. These remains, including casts of old vats, tell the story of the cave's role in providing resources during the early 19th century. The cave is also home to breathtaking natural wonders. Inside, visitors can find crystal formations, flowing underground streams, and even a natural fountain. Some parts of the cave feature a so-called Lost River and a 350-yard underground boat ride offering a truly unforgettable experience. The incredible scenery of stalactites, stalagmites, and sparkling walls is like stepping into another world. Whether you're a seasoned caver or simply someone looking for a unique adventure, Sloan's Valley Cave offers an unforgettable journey into the heart of Kentucky's natural beauty. Guided tours are available for visitors who want to explore this underground wonder while learning about its fascinating history and geology. So pack your gear, bring your sense of adventure, and get ready to discover one of Kentucky's greatest treasures. In 1981, On the night of Sunday, July 19th, Tony Hughes, a 17-year-old seasoned caver, prepared for an adventure with his companions, Tom Hughes and Rob Riemann. The group planned to explore the southern extension of Sloan's Valley Cave in Pulaski County, Kentucky. All three were experienced cavers, well trained in navigating underground systems. Tony, the most familiar with Sloan's Valley, had ventured into the cave at least 6 times before. His knowledge of its passages and routes gave the group confidence. The trio spent time planning their expedition. They packed essential caving gear, including helmets, headlamps, ropes, field maps, and snacks to sustain them through the long night. They knew that Sloan's Valley Cave, with its intricate network of passages, required careful preparation. Tony brought his field map of the cave in order to guide them through the maze-like system. They decided to enter the cave shortly after midnight in order to avoid the summer heat. As they reached the entrance, the weather was calm but humid, with remnants of heavy spring rain still visible. Outside, the forested area around the cave was quiet, save for the occasional chirping of crickets. Inside the cave, the air was damp and cool, with a slight musty smell typical of underground systems. Water dripped from the limestone walls, and pools of standing water dotted the cave floor. The group moved deeper into the southern part of the cave, their headlamps lighting up the rough, rocky walls around them. The beams of light created eerie shadows that danced across the dark, narrow passages. Every sound they made echoed in the vast underground space. Tony led the way, guiding his 2 companions through the winding tunnels. The trio moved carefully, watching their steps to avoid slipping on wet rocks and ducking under sharp stalactites hanging from the ceiling. After exploring for a few hours, they came to something that was blocking their way, a steep drop. It looked scary in the dim light. A rope hung down the slope, which they could use to climb down, but it was covered in thick mud, probably from the recent rain that had flooded some parts of the cave. The mud made the rope slippery and dangerous, which would be difficult even for people who were experienced at caving. Tony, feeling confident in his skills and experience, decided to go down first. "I'll check it out," he said to Tom and Rob, trying to sound calm despite the tension in the air. He gripped the muddy rope tightly, testing its strength before slowly sliding down. At around 3 a.m., Tony grabbed hold of the muddy rope and carefully slid down to a narrow ledge just below the top. The rope felt slick and unstable in his hands, the mud making it nearly impossible to grip properly. As he reached the ledge, a sinking realization hit him. He couldn't climb back up. The mud-coated rope was too slippery, and the slope was too steep for him to pull himself back to safety. His heart began to race as he looked up at Tom and Rob, who were waiting up above. "I can't climb back up," he shouted, his voice echoing through the cave. Despite the tension in his voice, Tony tried to stay calm. "Don't worry," he told them. "I'll find another way out and meet you at the entrance." While trusting Tony's experience and judgment, Tom and Rob nodded. They hesitated for a moment, worried about leaving their friend, but they eventually turned and began retracing their steps back towards the surface. At the same time, Tony turned to face the darkness below, looking for a different way to go. He kept going, venturing further into the cave. But as he went deeper, he found a new problem. The heavy spring rains had flooded many of the lower tunnels. Water filled the passageways in front of him, cold and murky, reflecting the weak light from his headlamp like a dark, wavy mirror. Each step was more challenging than the last. The cold water rose to his waist in some places, soaking him through and chilling him to the bone. Also, during his struggle down the rope, he had lost his field map, the one thing that could have helped him navigate the cave's complex network of twisting tunnels. Now, without the map, every passage looked the same. Left or right, up or down, he couldn't tell which way would lead to safety. Tony's ordeal was harrowing. He stumbled over jagged rocks and waded through waist-deep water searching for an exit. The damp air chilled him to the bone, and exhaustion set in. His muscles ached from the physical effort, and his hands were raw from gripping wet, rough surfaces. The cave was eerily silent, except for the occasional sound of dripping water echoing through the tunnels. Hours passed, and Tony began to feel the weight of his predicament. He was alone in the vast, dark cave with no clear sense of direction. Panic threatened to overtake him, but he forced himself to stay calm and focused. He knew that his best chance of survival was to keep moving and try to find his way back to the rope. Now, at the same time, Tom and Rob had gotten back to the surface and they realized that Tony wasn't with them. Worried about their friend, they decided to go back to the place where the rope was and look for him. They went back twice, shouting his name and searching for any sign of him. When they couldn't find him, they contacted the Pulaski County Rescue Squad, or PCRS, to ask for help. By 10 a.m., the PCRS had assembled a team of 8 rescuers. Equipped with specialized caving gear and extensive knowledge of the cave system, the team entered Sloan's Valley Cave to search for Tony. They methodically explored the southern extension, focusing on areas where Tony was most likely to be. Now, as the rescuers searched, Tony managed to find his way back to the rope drop. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, he struggled to climb the muddy rope. His hands slipped repeatedly, but he refused to give up. After a grueling effort, he finally reached the top and began making his way towards the cave entrance. At around noon, Tony came out from the cave, exhausted and covered in mud. His relief was immense as he stepped out into the daylight, safe at last. Unbeknownst to him, though, the rescue team was still inside the cave, combing through the passages in search of him. The rescuers finally came out of the cave, and they found out that Tony had already gotten out by himself. Now, while everyone was relieved that everything turned out okay, there were quite a few lessons to be learned from this. The cavers relied on their flashlights as their main source of light. But in a cave as vast and complex as Sloan's Valley, that limited light made it very easy to lose their sense of direction. The darkness of a cave can be overwhelming, and without enough light, it is much easier to get disoriented. Looking back on it, it would have been safer if Tony had checked his alternate route before sending Tom and Rob back to the surface. By staying together as a group, they could have supported each other and avoided the risks of splitting up in such a dangerous environment. This story is a reminder of the importance of teamwork, proper planning, and always having a backup plan when exploring caves. In the end, Tony was lucky to find his way out, but the ordeal could have had a much worse outcome. For all cavers, this serves as a lesson about the unpredictable nature of caves and the need for extra caution when venturing into the unknown. Imagine yourself and your family being swept away by a tidal wave of water. You're being thrashed mercilessly by the powerful water push, and everything around you is seemingly disappearing into a whirlpool, taking in everything and anything that you have ever owned, even your life. More than 50 years ago, a humongous flood took away the lives of as many as 125 people, leaving countless others injured, homeless, and devoid of families. And did you know that all of this disaster was attributed to an act of man rather than God? The Buffalo Creek Valley is a series of communities built upon the coal mining industry along the banks of a small stream known as Buffalo Creek. It's located in Logan County in West Virginia, famous for its coal mining operations in the United States. The county has also been highlighted for a number of disasters that it has faced in the long series of tragedies that coal corporations have perpetrated upon the people. A close look at Buffalo Creek illuminates the region's ties to coal. West Virginia became the coal mining child of the nation as it flourished between the mid-1800s and early 1900s. Logan County coal became easily transportable in 1904 after the completion of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad line from Charleston, West Virginia. By the 1970s, the Buffalo Mining Company, a Pittston Coal Company child corporation, owned the mines and the mining operations along Buffalo Creek. The Buffalo Mining Company built, or rather put together a series of dams along the middle fork of Buffalo Creek. These dams along Buffalo Creek are called coal refuse dams, or coal slurry impoundments. They were created using coal mining waste and sludge from good coal as it was washed, giving the dam the possibility of slipping. And that is what actually and clearly happened. The dam slipped and caused a disaster that was to be mourned for decades to come. They fell, creating a tide of coal sludge that killed 125 people, most of whom were school children. Disaster strikes. On the unfortunate morning of February 26, 1972, a traced pattern of human misery and suffering hit the people and counties of West Virginia when the uncalled-for disaster struck in the early morning hours. The people, busy in their morning routines with little warning, were swept away in a ferocious tidal wave of black wastewater that the wobbly dams couldn't hold. The loose tidal wave caused destruction of unimaginable magnitude upon more than a dozen communities in Buffalo Creek Hollow in Logan County. The flood, known more famously as the Buffalo Creek disaster, is considered one of the worst disasters in United States history. More than 130 million gallons of dark floodwater and wastewater from the coal mines tore down through the hollow, leaving behind hundreds of homes and vehicles destroyed, thousands of people homeless, and around 144 people, men, women, and children, dead by the end of it. One of the survivors, Shirley Markham, remembers that the only warning she got was from a lady neighbor, and recalls, quote, "The only warning we had was just a neighbor woman had spotted it and just pulled in front of our house and hollered, 'Run! The dam is broken!' And then you could hear the roar of it, and you could see it. I saw my neighbors' houses leave. I watched them crumble. I saw trees, logs, cars, slate, slush, you name it, and it was in that." Disaster in the making. Buffalo Mining Company's Dam Number 3 was already marked as a problem area and was well known around the creek. The people were already worried about the potential failure of the dams on the Middle Fork. It was clearly apparent, as one resident wrote a letter to the authorities in 1968 regarding the fears that the people faced as a community living close to the vulnerable dams. Pearl Woodrum of Saunders wrote a letter to the governor expressing his concerns over the potential disaster. He wrote, quote, "Every time it rains, it scares everyone to death. We are all afraid we will be washed away and drowned. Please, for God's sake, have the dump and water destroyed. Our lives are in danger." Later, in 1971, the dam was inspected, with findings stating, quote, "Lack of emergency spillway or overflow system from upper impoundment." The mining company knew that their dams were not considered safe by the Division of Water Resources as late as a couple days before the tragedy occurred. Yet, they failed to alert the people. They acknowledged that Dam Number 3's overflow pipes were blocked. Hence, the whole episode is considered a deliberate attempt to conceal the facts from the oncoming disaster. When the water level started to rise on February 26th, officials failed to warn the people in Buffalo Creek Valley. As quoted by Big John Bailey, who was killed by the floodwaters on February 26th, quote, "We've worked long and hard for the big coal operators, and they're thanking us by killing us." On the fateful morning of February 26, 1972, as feared, Dam Number 3 collapsed at around 8 a.m., pouring 132 million gallons of water down the Buffalo Creek Valley. The water swayed downwards in a 20 to 30 foot high tidal wave at about 7 feet per second. This flood traveled over 17 miles in 3 hours, destroying all 17 communities that came in its way. By 8:15, all the water that was held by Dam Number 3 had been emptied onto the Buffalo Creek Valley. By 11 a.m., the wall of water reached the last of the 17 communities, the town of Man. There, it took approximately 2 hours to drain into the Guyandotte River. Man became the headquarters of recovery for the people of the valley. The magnitude of the disaster. A total of 144 people were killed in the flood, while 7 were never accounted for after the disaster. 1,119 people were physically injured by the floodwaters. Approximately 4,000 people were left homeless when 507 homes were destroyed, 273 homes were left with significant damage, and 44 mobile homes were completely destroyed. 10 bridges and hundreds of miles of roads and highways were destroyed in the flood. The destruction left behind in the valley after the water receded would take years to recover from, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Mannix Porterfield, a reporter who covered the events of that tragic day, later recalled the destruction left in the flood's wake as, quote, "It looked like a battlefield. It was like some foreign enemy had flown in and nuked the place. Debris was everywhere. Bridges were smashed to bits. Homes were left in splinters. Railroad tracks, yanked up and twisted. They looked like huge metallic pretzels." Porterfield also recalled the stance of survivors who were so shocked and traumatized at the happenings of the day that they were at a loss to express their emotions. He said, quote, "They just had this blank stare of resignation. One of my coworkers said that people in those coal communities were used to being battered by this and that. They're used to hard times. And this was just another little installment in the progression of a hard life, I guess." Dealing with mass destruction and flood victims. The massive task of caring for the flood victims began right after the flood subsided. Those who were killed needed to be collected, identified, and buried. Those who survived needed places to stay, clothing, food, medicines, and sanitation facilities. Many had lost everything in the flood and needed to be taken care of. The Salvation Army put its foot forward and provided over 190,000 meals, set up 5 different food and clothing distribution centers, arranged shelters out of grade schools, and assisted almost 4,000 families. Victims also face psychological trauma, such as post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt. The symptoms of these disorders frequently made themselves known in the children who survived. In many cases, children tried to hide and disappear within themselves, staring off into thin air. In contrast, in other situations, the children were so terrified and traumatized that sedatives were administered to calm them down. The traumatic experience and the psychological impact of surviving an event like the Buffalo Creek flood stayed with its victims for the rest of their lives. Nationwide help and support. Following the disaster, Logan County residents received heartwarming support from across the nation. Families and individuals sent their support to the people of the Buffalo Creek Valley in an attempt to alleviate some of the burden by sending much-needed commodities, be it food, clothing, medical aid, or even heartfelt letters and prayers. A sense of community arose from the nightmare, with people sending so much clothing to the destroyed communities that they had to ask people to stop. Governors and dignitaries wrote letters expressing concern for the people of Logan County. Organizations offered whatever they could, from generators to medical supplies for those who were suffering. Even American youngsters were doing whatever was in their limited capacity to help the flood victims by raising money through scouts, or asking Governor Moore what they could do to help. The influx of aid supplies was so great that newspaper headlines announced the need for monetary donations instead of food, clothing, and other supplies, as the latter had been marked to provide more than enough, and now there was a need for a monetary influx. For this purpose, the Red Cross launched a special fund appeal channel for donation purposes. A Red Cross official stated, quote, "Monetary help is required to supplement expenditures for shelter and feeding, repair of homes, and to provide essential household furnishings, medical and funeral assistance, and other basic essentials traditionally provided to disaster victims." The government's response post-tragedy. The West Virginia state government didn't lag behind and was at the forefront of dealing with all the repercussions the flood had left behind. The state of West Virginia's offices dealt vigorously with emergencies and reacted quickly to the events that unfolded in Logan County after the mishap. The state police department deployed its teams, which moved in and set up a temporary morgue, protected the damaged property from further sabotage by looters, and categorically documented the damage as seen in the valley. The National Guard commenced search and rescue operations, assured safe evacuations of people stuck anywhere after flooding, and dedicatedly built the much-needed bridges and showers. The West Virginia Health Council arranged a staffed clinic that handed out typhoid vaccines, handled flood-related medical emergencies, and arranged for hospital transportation as and when needed. The Department of Highways surveyed the roads and organized cleanup equipment to help in mobility as much as the circumstances allowed. Recovery operations and new challenges. As soon as the immediate needs were fairly met, housing, redevelopment, and employment were giant tasks to be dealt with on a priority basis. Without proper housing arrangements, the surviving families were forced to stay in the shelters provided on the school premises, which further delayed the restarting of education. As a temporary initiative, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development provided trailers to the flood victims. As soon as some of the communities were cleared of debris, small neighborhoods of these trailers were put in place to move people from the school shelters to their makeshift homes. The rent of these homes was covered by the West Virginia government, and eventually the victims could own the trailers they were living in. The next big issue was generating income by creating employment opportunities. Without an income to support them, people could not begin the cycle of building their homes and lives. People were anxious to get back up on their own feet. They wanted to return to living independently and providing for themselves. However, the reality was that the area was disaster-stricken, and there were very few employment opportunities, which made the job market highly saturated. This necessitated the need for creating an office that could help people get employment, which led to the West Virginia government setting up offices that helped get people into jobs, such as working on the new highway construction projects. Redevelopment and recreation. Once the basic needs were fulfilled and people started to carry on their lives to some extent, requirements for recreational activities arose, which led to recreational projects being undertaken in the Creek Valley, often as suggestions from the youth. A petition was signed to build a swimming pool for the general public, and a grant was issued to accomplish it. Further, local kids expressed an interest in having a tennis court to enjoy, and another committee was established to raise the money. This led to different fundraisers being held, and businesses were more open to helping people in whatever way they could. The communities of the Buffalo Creek Valley were excited and a bit relieved to see the youngsters coming out of their trauma and expressing their interest in participating in something constructive. With all that the people have gone through after losing so much in the flooding, it was very heartwarming to see the youth coming up with exciting recreational ideas, and the government and authorities were more than eager to do all they could to fulfill the people's demands. The petition filed against the Pittston Coal Company. As could be foreseen, it wasn't long after the flood that the lawsuits were filed against the Pittston Coal Company, the party guilty and responsible for the slurry dams. One lawsuit was filed by the state of West Virginia, and the other class action lawsuit was filed by the victims, survivors of the flood. In March of 1972, following the Buffalo Creek case, 2 commissions were launched. The first ad hoc commission was established by Governor Moore to investigate the reasons for the failure of Dam Number 3. The commission was charged with determining who was at fault for the dam's collapse and the resulting loss of life and destruction of property. The commission consisted of 9 men with ties to the coal industry. It gathered witnesses, heard testimonies, and talked to experts in coal mining operations to best determine why the tragedy occurred, who was responsible for it, and how it could be avoided in the future. The second commission, the Citizens Commission, was established to counter this bias. The Citizens Commission found Pittston Coal reckless and negligent, and the state was negligent in ensuring safety compliance. In conclusion, the parent company of Buffalo Mining Company was blamed for the disaster happening in the first place. However, the commission did acknowledge that the lack of laws and regulations by the state and federal governments contributed to the dam's failure. The commission concluded that, quote, "No evidence of an act of God was found by the commission." The statement was in answer to the parent company's initial absolution of itself of the blaming, stating that the reasons were an act of God. Lawsuits filed and monetary settlement. Approximately 125 families and 600 individuals signed up to participate in the lawsuit filed against the Pittston Coal Company, represented by Arnold and Porter. The lawsuit broke a new record, addressing the psychological and communal losses suffered in the disaster alongside property and monetary losses. All plaintiffs above the age of 6 provided personal statements about their traumatic experiences. It included people who saw their loved ones getting drowned in the flood, who saw their homes being ripped apart in the tidal wave, and people who almost tasted death. Each person involved in the case was examined by both physicians and psychologists, and the effects of survivor syndrome and PTSD were observed in both children and adults. According to the argument made by Arnold and Porter, the plaintiffs of this case suffered extraordinarily, having lived through unspeakable horrors and having seen awful sights. Survivors were affected psychologically by the things that they had witnessed. Their lives had been halted. They had no homes, no belongings, and lost loved ones. With such a strong, valid argument, a cash settlement worth $13.5 million was agreed upon before the case went to trial. The plaintiffs received the whole amount, out of which $2 million was set aside for victims under the age of 18. As pro bono work, the Arnold and Porter firm exhausted thousands of work hours and created a foundation from some monetary funds from the settlement amount to rebuild the Buffalo Creek Valley. The foundation eventually helped build a community center equipped with the first fire station and created a new health clinic in the valley. However, the truth is that no dollar amount could erase the horrors of what happened at the Buffalo Creek flood for the survivors. Buffalo Creek still lives on with the legacy of generational trauma for survivors and their kin. Buffalo Creek today. A memorial was enacted in 1973 in memory of the flood fatalities. It is a scenic park with a picnic shelter, a podium, wooden benches, and a visitor's register. There is also a victims' monument, a small wall ingrained with the names of all of the unfortunate ones who lost their lives in the disastrous flood of 1972. The single building, designed in a certain way, has since grown to house a large children's room and a collection of more than 25,000 written, audio, and video documents, including those related to the flood itself. The Buffalo Creek watershed covers about 20 miles of stream. It is one of southern West Virginia's most popular trout fishing spots today. Since the 1972 flood, improved water quality and good fish habitats have changed the area, encouraging fishermen to visit and showcase the improved water quality.
Three college students had a mission to enter Bone Norman Cave, stay overnight, and exit through a little-known pathway. Their trip became a fight for survival after they lost the exit and ran out of energy over 10 miles into the cave. This is the story of the Bone Norman Cave rescue. The game plan. Bone Norman Cave is found in the unassuming state of West Virginia. It's often dubbed a flyover state, with nothing too exciting to attract visitors. But locals have access to some amazing caves, like the Bone Norman Cave near Rennick. Bone Norman has a 3-mile main passage that's open to beginners. That's the most commonly traveled route. But the cave also has deeper, more complex routes that extend further, pushing the Bone Norman Cave into a system that spans 15 miles of intricate turns and sprawling earthen tunnels. But even the 15-mile length of Bone Norman is just what's been surveyed. The total length could be far longer, so if cavers get lost, they might never be seen again. The system is named for the Bone Cave Route and the Norman Route. The Norman side takes cavers through a gorgeous portion of the cave system. There are fast-flowing rivers, perfect karst or rock formations, and waterfalls. The exit of the cave through the Bone Route has less exposure to the elements, and it's generally less interesting. So even cavers who travel through Norman will often turn around instead of going all the way through. The cave can be treacherous, with a year-round temperature of roughly 52 degrees. The cave's subterranean streams, while beautiful, have heavy water flow from the Rennick River above. The perfect conditions for spontaneous flooding that could quickly kill cavers exploring its depths. In early 2012, 3 college students named Jay Buccina, Grant Blaisdell, and Matt Stevens were all in their early 20s and still relatively new to the world of caving when they decided to take the challenge of the full Bone Norman Cave route. The party of 3 left from the city of Kaiser, took a trip to the southwestern part of the state, and planned to stay inside the cave for an overnight adventure. Each of them had been to over 10 caves so far, but that's still nothing compared to the thousands of hours cave experts have logged in the dark expanses below the ground. They were slowly increasing the difficulty of their caves, which is always a good idea when learning a new skill. The difference is that when you find your limits in football or some other hobby, the stakes aren't very high. If you lose in a game, your pride stings, and you either give up or try again later. When you hit a wall with your splunking skills, it could be game over for your life. The caving world is advanced by leaps and bounds compared to what it was 50 years ago. So much safety information is available, and mock rescues are held all around the world to train experts and novices alike in the techniques they could use to save lives. But none of these prepare you for the terror of the moment when you realize you're stuck, when you ran out of luck, and no one is there to save you. Bone Norman was the biggest, most challenging cave they had been to yet. Blaisdell had been to the cave once before. So, on a Saturday, he led Buccina and Stevens through the first part of the cave to reach the spot where he turned around on his previous visit. The Caving Marathon. This first section wasn't very technical, but it took an extremely long time. Finally, after 8 hours on their first day, they reached the spot where Blaisdell had stopped his previous journey, a campsite used by researchers and other cavers who venture down here. Now make no mistake, this isn't your average campsite. There were few comforts that you'd find above, but it was relatively safe and big enough to sprawl out beside the surging river of the cave. They reached the campsite at 5 a.m. on Sunday, and they were already getting worn down. To make it through the night in the cold, damp tunnels below ground, the three had to pack extra equipment in large, cumbersome backpacks. They had to bring sleeping bags, extra food, and even more light than usual. The bags always feel light when you first pick them up, but a rucksack full of supplies quickly becomes a burden even on straight ground. But Bone Norman's terrain was much more challenging. This early fatigue was coming back to bite them, but they were confident that a decent night's rest would re-energize them and get them ready for the next day's journey. However, they didn't consider how sleep deprivation could impact their trip. They had all left early the day before. Each of them were from different colleges around West Virginia, so the travel time varied. It wasn't just the physical tiredness of their exploring that weighed them down, but also the mental fatigue from no sleep. Compounding the problem, they only got 4 hours of sleep in the cave. They had to cut their sleep short, in part because it was difficult to get comfortable with the rough, rocky floor under them, but they also couldn't sleep long because they had to push faster if they wanted to exit on time without worrying anyone. If they had given themselves a bit more time, they might have been okay. Time limits can evoke a primal fear in even the toughest of people, and the fear of stressing their families could also cloud their judgment. The group had two choices. They could turn around and head out the same path they came from, or venture onward through territory that was new to even the team's leader. They wanted to go all the way, so they started looking through passages and twisting tunnels to find the exit through the bone side of the cave system. This exit cave has some formations, but the surroundings are mostly just clay, silt, and unexciting stone. Without any noteworthy details, these passages start to all look the same, making navigation far more difficult and the challenge less rewarding. The further they went, the more uneasy they became. They kept cool and relaxed demeanors as they advanced, but within, they must have felt the slow, creeping dread start to grip their spine. Where's the exit? As fear mounts, it causes adrenaline to spike, which narrows a person's vision, leading them to miss visual information among their peripheries. As the men bravely, or foolishly, kept charging ahead, they might have been missing crucial side passages along the walls of the cave as their sight literally became tunnel vision. When the pump of adrenaline wears off and the body becomes exhausted, it isn't designed for peak levels of stress for long periods. It begins to shut down when we need it most. And that's for normal situations. These three were already tired with a long way to go. Contagious yawning dampened their morale as they pushed through mud and dirt. Eventually, they reached the back end of the cave. In front of them, the ground, ceiling, and walls all met into towering, solid stone, all curved and pristine. They reached a dead end. In disbelief, one asked if they were sure they checked all the side passages. They thought they had. They had missed the connection between the Bone and Norman passages. A tiny crevice that extends for what feels like eternity. This first connecting path is only 1 foot high in some points, so they could have looked down it and deemed it impassable without knowing it was their way out. Even after this difficult challenge, this squeeze opens into another small and tight tunnel called Devil's Pitch before leading out of the system and onto the grassy hills above. After 11 grueling hours with no luck finding the connection, they turned back around, following the main passage of the cave back to the campsite. All the while, the cold started to chill them to their bones. At 9 p.m. on Sunday, 3 hours after they were scheduled to make it out, they made it back to the campsite. Their exhaustion should have helped them get some shut-eye, but they found only 4 more slivers of rest before they splashed muddied water onto their faces to wake up. Then, they tried to gather themselves to figure out what to do. They needed to assess the situation. Matt pulled out the food. The others did the same. They were running low despite rationing, since they spent extra time searching and had to retrace their steps. Next, they checked their light sources, also low. If they ran out of light while trying to find the exit, especially down a side tunnel, that could be a death sentence. The rest of their lives would be spent screaming through the echoing rock, trying to find one another in their campsite by touch alone in the blinding darkness. The bone exit was a loss, but they could still go back the way they came through, right? Well, the group somberly realized they didn't have enough supplies or energy to make it through the 6-hour slog to the entrance. Staying at the campsite seemed like the best idea. If rescuers came in time, they would definitely check here first. To aid in a potential rescue, they backtracked a few miles toward the entrance to etch the date and time into the mud, along with a message saying, "Waiting for rescue along stream." Then, the 3 took out emergency, high-visibility orange tape and started sticking it along the cave wall as best as they could. To suppress any fear, they turned to their raw intellect and tried to map out their situation. Since they hadn't made it home yet, their families would have called at roughly the time they got back to camp. It was now 1 a.m. on Monday morning, so they had around 17 to 19 hours before rescuers could reach them, if they were lucky. They told themselves they weren't going to panic, and started telling jokes and stories to pass the time and to keep their minds busy to avoid thinking about the situation. Some people bury their fears with these kinds of distractions. Others are just made of steel. In the heat, or rather the cold, lingering chill of the moment, it didn't matter. As long as they could pick up their spirits and hold on to hope, they'd have a better chance of survival. They did the smart move and told friends and family about their plans before leaving. They were scheduled to exit on Sunday in the early evening before sunset. The sleepless nights of the cavers plagued their families as well on Sunday as they tossed and turned, sick with worry since they hadn't heard from the cavers yet. All sorts of situations ran through their heads. Maybe they just forgot to charge their cell phones. Maybe they found some new friends during their trip and went to the bar to hang out. Or maybe the worst scenario had come to pass and their loved ones were gone. Early Monday morning, after fitful nights with fears bouncing around in their nervous heads, family members of each of the 3 cavers called one another. Maybe one of the cavers called home and the rest just forgot, so it would be good to check with them. They all shared the radio silence that they were experiencing and reported the group missing. The Bone Norman Rescue. It took rescue teams almost no time to scramble into action. The Rennick Volunteer Fire Department got to the scene, and experienced cavers from nearby towns got over to the cave as fast as they could. The Rennick Volunteer Fire Department was the first to spring into action. They immediately found the cars belonging to the lost cavers, so the rescuers knew they were still somewhere inside the cave. Some members of the early rescue team thought the group had gone down the 3-mile pathway usually traveled by beginner to intermediate cavers. That conflict could have been deadly, since the college team reportedly went over 6 miles along a different route. In total, there were 25 men that made it to the search party. Conflicting reports claim the assistant chief of Rennick's fire department, April Harvey, or Doug Moore from the Mountaineer Area Rescue Group, or MARGE, were leading the rescue operation. Either way, they split the team into 5 smaller groups. After a depressing 16-hour hunt, nothing turned up. The 3-mile stretch yielded no results, no sign of the lost men. The fire department and other inexperienced crews couldn't tackle the remaining winding, complex labyrinth of the cave. After the 25 first responders had to tap out, new volunteers had their crack at it. Meanwhile, hundreds of passionate cavers all united across West Virginia and started traveling to Bone Norman to aid in the search, including 2 members of the Virginia Tech Cave Club. The 2 Cave Club volunteers could understand the minds of their fellow college students. They immediately went for the campsite while worrying about their fate. If the 3 cavers had been prepared for the main route and accidentally took the path to the deeper portion, then the cold and wet sloshes of this section could have taken hours off their lives, and time was running out. The 2 rescuers saw the messages in the mud and the orange tape. They picked up their pace. They agreed the team had to be at the research campsite. If they were alive, they would be there, unless one or more of them had been injured. The families informed them that they were well equipped, but rescuers can't always rely on this information. Overshooting assumptions on how long cavers can last could be a fatal mistake. Every second counts. Doesn't matter how long you think they have. Plus, it's common for the least experienced people in every hobby to believe that they are better and more prepared than they really are. Without experience, they don't always know what to expect. Underestimating caves has cost the lives of thousands of people. And even those who get rescued can still be scarred for life, even when they thought their trip would be a breeze. The Virginia Tech team followed the orange tape, but they didn't really need it. They were confident they knew where to go. Another thought started to worry them as they trekked through the caverns. What if the trio panicked and tried to split up? Or what if they ventured away from the campsite to search for the exit and got lost even further beyond the safety of the well-known camp? The 2 of them would do their best, but they couldn't cover the whole 15-mile stretch alone. Even a full team would take days to comb through everything, and by then it would probably be too late. Time ticked away closer to 6 p.m. on Monday, the fastest time the group thought that they could get saved. They sat anxiously waiting, but no sign of rescuers yet. Of course, earlier they calculated that they had a 3-hour window when rescuers would show up, so they tried not to lose hope. But each second brought them closer to the brink. At 7 p.m. on Monday night, smack dab in the middle of the time they had estimated, a gentle glow of headlamps started to emerge around a bend. Now, at first, they weren't sure if it was real, since the darkness can play tricks on you, but this light didn't warp or change like visions in the abyss. It steadily grew, and the 3 college students knew they were saved. After eating to regain some strength, the Virginia Tech team helped them gather their supplies, clean up the campsite, and crawled, climbed, and hiked back to the entrance on the Norman side of Bone Norman Cave. After 2 whole days underground with no light, no fresh air, no comforts of home, they exited their stone prison and were saved. Blaisdell acknowledged their folly, that they had taken on a challenge they weren't ready for just yet. Instead of folding to the fear of being lost in the underground labyrinth, Blaisdell was inspired. He went back to class just 1 day after returning home from his brush with death. He had questions for more experienced cavers. He wanted to learn from his mistakes and prepare for the next adventure. He decided to work harder, learn all the tricks of caving, and eventually he wanted to become a rescuer like those that saved his life and the life of his companions on that fateful day in Bone Norman Cave.
What does it feel like to be trapped deep underground, surrounded by rising floodwaters with no way out? The sound of rushing water filling the darkness. What would you do if the only way to survive was to fight against nature's fury? In the depths of the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave, a group of Boy Scouts face this terrifying reality. What started as an exciting adventure turned into a harrowing battle for survival when a sudden and violent storm flooded the cave. How did they endure the cold, the fear, and the unrelenting power of the water? And how did their leader pull off a daring rescue? How many of them came out alive? Let's uncover the mystery. Welcome to Sinks of the Roundstone Cave, one of the most fascinating and adventurous caves in Kentucky. Located just 30 minutes away from Mount Vernon, this cave offers an unforgettable experience for explorers, adventurers, and nature lovers. Whether you enjoy walking, climbing, or crawling, this cave has something for everyone. Be prepared to get wet, as you may need to wade through water in some sections, so bring clothes that you don't mind getting muddy or soaked. One of the highlights of this cave adventure is the Pancake, a tight crawl-through space that leads to the cave's exit, a thrilling challenge for those seeking a unique experience. The Sinks of the Roundstone Cave, also known locally as Mullins Station Cave, is the fourth longest cave in Rockcastle County. It is part of the Daniel Boone National Forest and stretches over 13,500 feet. This cave has been a favorite spot for locals, cavers, youth groups, and college students for many years. The cave has a rich history tied to the early railroad workers who built the nearby L&N railroad tracks. The west entrance of the cave is located right next to these tracks, and remnants of its past, like an old water barrel and kerosene lantern pots, can still be seen near the entrance. These artifacts serve as a reminder of the cave's historical importance. The Sinks of the Roundstone offers a variety of experiences depending on the path you choose. Most of the cave features large, spacious rooms that are easy to navigate. If you stick to the main passages, it is an easy and enjoyable trek. However, for those seeking a bit more adventure, the cave's northern and western sections feature areas perfect for climbing and exploring tighter crawlways. The cave also has a southern passage with water-filled routes, where the water can be up to 20 feet deep during normal conditions. Keep in mind that this area can flood quickly during heavy rains, with water levels rising by as much as 30 feet in just a few hours. The cave floods from two main sources, a stream entering at the main entrance, and a tall waterfall in the middle of the cave. Visitors are advised to avoid these areas during rainy weather. There are multiple entrances to the cave, with the most popular being the railroad entrance and the main entrance. The railroad entrance is about 3 feet high and 10 feet wide, located near the L&N railroad tracks just before a railroad tunnel. Most visitors enter through this entrance and then exit through the main entrance. For those seeking a scenic route, the scenic entrance is another option, located farther along the tracks near an old quarry site. Parking is available near the 4th railroad crossing from Highway Route 25, as it is considered safer than the 3rd crossing due to reports of vehicle break-ins. From the parking area, it's just a short walk along the tracks to reach the cave entrances. The Sinks of the Roundstone Cave is a publicly accessible cave, but it is important to take precautions. Always check the weather before visiting, as flooding can occur rapidly. Bring appropriate gear, including a helmet, headlamp, sturdy shoes, and clothing that you don't mind getting wet or dirty. Since the cave is a popular spot for locals and cavers, there is some litter and graffiti in certain areas. But the adventure and beauty of the cave make it well worth the trip. If you're ready for an exciting and memorable experience, then the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave is just waiting to be explored. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced caver, this destination offers something for everyone. From historical artifacts to breathtaking passages and thrilling challenges, this cave is a true hidden gem in Kentucky. So pack your gear, gather your friends, and get ready to embark on an adventure that you will never forget. On June 6, 1981, Jack Hissong, a 41-year-old seasoned outdoorsman, led a group of 8 Boy Scouts and scout leaders from Troop 44 based in Mack, Ohio, on what was supposed to be an exciting and memorable caving adventure. The group included adults R. Morris, 38, and E. Zimmerman, 48, alongside Scouts R. Fine, 17, T. Morris, 13, D. Kokata, 12, G. Marsh, 12, N. Long, 12, and D. Moore, 12. For most of these young adventurers, this was their first real caving experience, and their excitement was palpable. The days leading up to the trip were filled with preparation. Hissong conducted a slideshow presentation to teach the group about caving, the necessary equipment, and basic safety tips. The scouts learned how to use multiple light sources, the importance of wearing hard hats, and packing food and emergency supplies. On the evening before the trip, the group checked their gear to ensure that everyone was prepared. Spirits were high as the group set out for the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave in Rockcastle County, Kentucky, a destination known for its fascinating underground passages and challenging terrain. The weather that morning seemed manageable, with only a 40% chance of light thunder showers. The forecast predicted clearing skies later in the day, so the group felt confident about their adventure. Jack Hissong, their experienced leader, had been in the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave during rainy conditions before. From what he had seen in the past, water levels only rose a few inches during rain, which was not enough to cause concern. Still, to be extra careful, Hissong checked the streams near the cave entrance. Everything looked normal, so the group decided that it was safe to proceed. At 10 a.m., they entered the cave through the railroad tunnel entrance, full of excitement for the day ahead. Once inside, the scouts were surprised by the cave's beauty and size. Towering walls of limestone surrounded them, and narrow tunnels led to hidden wonders. Using their headlamps, they lit up the dark passages, their laughter and voices echoing through the underground chambers. They climbed over rocks, crawled through tight spaces, and splashed through shallow streams. For the first 4 hours, it felt like an incredible adventure, a perfect mix of fun and learning. They even stopped for a lunch break, sharing stories and snacks before setting off again to explore more of the cave. But then, everything changed. As they made their way back to the main passage towards the cave's main entrance, they noticed something was wrong. A path that had been dry, or at least a little wet, was now completely flooded. The group stood in shock as they saw a fast-moving stream of water 4 feet deep roaring through the passage. But it wasn't just the water itself that was alarming. The current was so strong that it carried floating debris, like leaves and branches, showing just how powerful the flood had become. It became clear that something drastic had happened outside. Heavy rain must have caused a sudden and dangerous surge of runoff, and now the cave was filling with water. The group was no longer just exploring, they were now in real danger. Hissong went ahead to check out the situation. He carefully walked into the rushing water, feeling how strong the current was as it pushed against him. It was obvious that it would be much too dangerous for the scouts to cross. Just one wrong step could sweep them away. Hissong quickly decided to turn the group around. Their only hope was to go back the way they had come, retracing their steps towards the railroad tunnel entrance. As the group made their way back towards the railroad tunnel entrance, the situation became even more dangerous. The water in the cave was rising fast, and the mud-covered floors were slippery and treacherous. Every step felt like a struggle. When they reached a narrow, steep section called the funnel, things got even worse. The steep, muddy slopes were so slick that it was nearly impossible to climb across. The group tried to find other routes, but every alternative was blocked by water. Hissong, determined to keep everyone safe, quickly came up with a plan. Using ropes and slings, he created a hand line for the scouts to hold on to as they crossed the dangerous area. It was a slow and nerve-wracking process. One by one, the scouts took their turn, gripping the hand line tightly while the rising water swirled around their feet. The sound of rushing water echoed through the dark cave, a constant reminder of the danger that they were in. Some of the younger scouts were scared, but Hissong kept encouraging them, telling them to stay calm and keep moving. When they finally reached the junction room, their relief turned to despair. What had once been a passable area was now completely flooded. Powerful torrents of water roared through the room, creating chaotic cross-currents and waterfalls that crashed from nearby passages. The once quiet and majestic cave now felt like a roaring monster. The swirling, violent water made it clear that there was no way that they could continue. They were trapped. Understanding how serious the situation was, Hissong made a bold decision. He would try to leave the cave by himself to find help. He knew that it was risky, but it seemed like their only hope. He walked into the powerful current, determined to fight his way out. But the water was much stronger than he had thought. The first time he tried, the force of the water knocked him off his feet and pulled him under. He struggled to hold his breath and fight his way back to the surface, finally managing to grab onto a ledge to keep from being swept away again. Undeterred, Hissong tried again. This time, the current was even more aggressive. He was dragged under once more, slamming against the rocks as the water tossed him around like a rag doll. With every ounce of strength that he had left, he fought his way to a small ledge 140 feet away from the group. Breathing hard and shaken, he realized that he couldn't risk another attempt. If he failed again, he might not survive. Defeated, but alive, Hissong climbed back to where the scouts were waiting. He told them that they had no choice but to wait for the water to recede. They moved to a higher, drier area of the cave and huddled together for warmth, knowing that their survival depended upon staying calm and working as a team. The group went back to a high, dry spot inside the cave. As time went by, the cold and the damp started to affect them badly. They were now in real danger of getting hypothermia. To stay warm, the scouts huddled together in a so-called body pile, trying to keep as much body heat as possible. They put all of their remaining food together and divided it up into small portions to keep their energy up. If someone got too cold, they were told to move around in some nearby small spaces to warm up. Despite the dangerous situation, the group remained calm under Hissong's leadership. He communicated with them using lights and shouting, reassuring them that they would make it out safely. After observing the water level for hours, Hissong decided to make another attempt to exit the cave once the flow had subsided enough to be safely navigable. On his third try, Jack Hissong finally managed to get out of the cave early Sunday morning. The floodwaters inside the cave had started to go down a little, but it was still very difficult. Outside the cave, the heavy rain had caused roads to flood, making it dangerous to drive. Hissong's car kept stopping because water was rising around it, forcing him to turn back and find a different way to go. Determined to rescue the group, he kept going, driving through the dark, wet night. Eventually, Hissong reached a mining site where he managed to get a truck inner tube. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline, something that he could use to ferry the scouts through the deepest, most dangerous sections of the cave. Wasting no time, he also contacted the state police to alert them to the emergency before heading back to the cave. With the inner tube and a strong determination to rescue his group, Hissong went back into the cave. Seeing him return must have given a huge boost of hope to the cold, wet, and scared scouts who had been waiting for hours in the dark. Without wasting any time, Hissong started working. One at a time, he helped each scout get into the inner tube and then carefully led them through the flooded passageways. Getting everyone out was a slow and stressful process. The water was still dangerously deep in some areas, and the currents were powerful. Hissong stayed focused, constantly making sure that each scout was safe as he carried them through the deep parts. The younger scouts held tightly to the inner tube, their faces pale with fear, while the older ones tried to help out in any way they could. Each trip across the water felt like a very long time, with the loud roar of the water echoing all around them and the shadows of the cave making them even more anxious. Despite the danger, Hissong stayed calm and focused, encouraging the group and guiding them step by step. Finally, after what felt like an endless ordeal, the last scout was brought through the flooded section. By 7:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, 21 and a half hours after they had first entered the cave, the entire group came out into the morning light. The scouts and their leaders were very tired, completely wet, and shaking from the cold. But they were alive and safe, all because of Hissong's bravery and how quickly he thought on his feet. The morning sun felt like a warm hug as they walked out of the cave, leaving behind the terrifying experience that none of them would ever forget. Now, looking back on it, the group had likely considered the weather carefully before entering the cave. But the storm that hit was highly unusual. It dumped 3.6 inches of rain in just 2 hours, far more than anyone could have expected. While Hissong's decision to attempt an exit during the peak of the flood was incredibly brave, it was also extremely risky. If a safe place to wait exists during a flood, staying put and waiting for the waters to recede is often the wiser choice. In this case, their refuge inside the cave kept the group safe until the flood began to subside.
What if a single moment of distraction changed everything? A quiet village, a playful child, and a deep, dark well hiding in plain sight. What starts as an ordinary day turns into a race against time, one that grips the hearts of millions. Have you ever wondered how far people would go to save a life? How does hope endure when the odds seem impossible? In this chilling story, a 5-year-old boy vanishes into the depths of the earth, sparking a desperate rescue mission that captures the world's attention. What happened in those harrowing hours underground? And what was the fate of little Rayon? Stay with us as we unravel the mystery behind one of the most heartbreaking disasters to unfold in recent times. The Rif region of northern Morocco, particularly the mountainous area around Chefchaouen, is a place of stunning natural beauty. However, it also faces significant challenges. The region is well known for the cultivation of cannabis, which is the primary source of income for many struggling families. Unlike the traditional local plant, Keef hashish, which can grow with just rainwater, newer imported hybrid cannabis varieties need a lot of water to thrive. To meet this demand, local farmers often dig deep wells to access underground water, as surface water is becoming scarce. These wells must be very deep because the underground water is also drying up due to prolonged droughts. Drought has been a growing problem in the region, making water even harder to find. This issue has forced people to dig deeper and deeper to reach water, increasing the risks and costs. Covered wells are common here to prevent tragic accidents, such as people or animals falling into them. Sadly, though, accidents like this have happened in many places beyond Morocco, including Spain, Algeria, Poland, and Germany, where illegal wells are also widespread due to water shortages. The struggle for water in Morocco became a major concern during the 2016 Hirak Rif movement, which highlighted the challenges faced by local communities. These issues reflect a global problem as many countries are dealing with the consequences of drought and water scarcity. In Spain, for example, there are an estimated 500,000 illegal wells. These hardships show how water shortages can impact people's lives and livelihoods, often leading to tragic consequences. On the quiet afternoon of February 1st, 2022, tragedy struck a small village called Iran, nestled in Chefchaouen province, Morocco. A 5-year-old boy named Rayan Oram was playing outside near his home while his father worked nearby. It was a scene of simple rural life, where children often play freely in the open spaces surrounding their homes. But in a split second, the peace of that day turned into a nightmare. Rayan's father, Khalid Oram, had been busy repairing a dry well close to their house. The well was narrow and deep, a common sight in the mountainous region where such wells are crucial for accessing underground water. And for just a brief moment, Khalid looked away from his son, and when he turned back, Rayan was gone. Panic set in as the family searched frantically, only to discover tiny footprints leading to the well's opening. Peering inside, they were horrified to hear Rayan's faint cries for help echoing from the depths below. Using a flashlight and a phone camera, the family quickly confirmed that Rayan had fallen into the well. The shaft was 105 feet deep and dangerously narrow, measuring only 45 centimeters at its widest point, and then narrowing further as it descended. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the family contacted local authorities for help. As news of the accident spread, villagers and volunteers gathered at the scene, determined to save the boy. They attempted to reach him using traditional methods, but the well's narrow structure made it impossible. Even experienced rescuers could not descend safely. Despite these challenges, they did confirm that Rayan was still alive. Authorities soon arrived with heavy machinery, including bulldozers, to aid in the rescue effort. A new plan was devised. Instead of trying to descend into the well, they would dig a parallel trench alongside it.
The idea was to dig vertically to Rayon's level and then create a horizontal tunnel to reach him. The work began immediately, but the task was fraught with difficulties. As rescuers began digging, they carefully monitored Rayon's condition using a camera lowered into the well. The footage showed that he was alive but injured, suffering minor head wounds. Food, water, and oxygen were all sent down in the hope that he could use them, though it was unclear if he was ever able to access these supplies. By February 3rd, 2 days after Rayon's fall, the rescue operation had gained national and international attention. Cameras from news outlets captured the painstaking efforts of the workers as they dug through rocky soil, inching closer to the trapped boy. Medical teams, including an ambulance and a helicopter from the Royal Moroccan Gendarmerie, were stationed nearby, ready to provide immediate care once Rayon was rescued. The digging was slow and dangerous. The soil around the well was unstable, and there was a constant risk of a cave-in. Rescuers worked in shifts, stopping frequently to assess the safety of the trench. The progress was agonizingly slow, and every hour that passed added to the tension. The sight of bulldozers carving through the earth, combined with the presence of crowds praying and anxiously watching, created a scene of both hope and despair. As the rescue unfolded, the village of Iran became a focal point for people across Morocco and beyond. Social media lit up with messages of support and prayers for Rayon. Hashtags like Save Rayon trended worldwide as people followed the updates with bated breath. The tragedy united people in a shared sense of compassion and urgency, with many offering assistance and words of encouragement to the rescuers. Even as the hours turned into days, rescuers refused to give up. They dug carefully, using hand tools when they approached the area that Rayon was trapped in order to avoid causing vibrations that might collapse the surrounding soil. Pipes were installed to reinforce the tunnel walls and also to ensure the safety of the rescue team. On February 5th, the fourth day of the rescue effort, the team finally reached the level where Rayon was trapped. However, their progress was delayed by a large rock that blocked the horizontal tunnel. It took 3 grueling hours to remove the obstacle. Rescuers continued with extreme caution, knowing that the final stage of the operation was the most delicate. At around 9:30 p.m., Rayon was finally reached and pulled from the well. Cheers erupted from the gathered crowd who had been waiting anxiously for this moment. People hugged and cried, overcome with relief and joy. For a brief moment, it seemed that the nightmare was over. But the joy was short-lived. Moments after Rayon was brought to the surface, officials announced the heartbreaking news. He had not survived. A royal statement confirmed his death, and King Mohammed VI personally called Rayon's parents to offer his condolences. The crowd, which had been celebrating just minutes earlier, fell silent. Tears flowed freely as the devastating reality sank in. Khalid Oram, Rayon's father, was inconsolable. He had stayed at the scene throughout the rescue, praying and hoping for his son's survival. "May God be with my son," he said earlier, his voice filled with anguish. Rayon's mother was equally distraught. Rayon's parents were taken to the cemetery in an ambulance for the burial, accompanied by villagers who shared in their grief. Rayon's story touched hearts around the world. In Morocco, it sparked a wave of mourning and reflection. People from all walks of life offered their condolences to the family. Politicians, celebrities, and ordinary citizens alike expressed their sorrow, recognizing the tragedy as a reminder of the fragile nature of life and the importance of community in times of crisis. The accident attained widespread media coverage in both North African and international media. Several news outlets in particular praised the response and support from the Algerian people, despite current political tensions between Morocco and Algeria. Hashtags including Save Rayon and its Arabic equivalent became trending in Morocco, Algeria, and France, where a large North African diaspora lives. The news soon spread to neighboring Arab countries, and updates about Rayon were broadcast on most Arab national channels. On February 7, 2022, a funeral took place for Rayon, attended by many who came to pay their respects. Though his life was tragically cut short, Rayon's story brought people together in an extraordinary way. It reminded the world of the power of hope, compassion and solidarity in the face of adversity. While his loss is deeply painful, the outpouring of love and support that his family received serves as a testament to the goodness of humanity. The incident also highlighted the challenges faced by rural communities in Morocco, where deep wells are a necessity due to water scarcity but also pose significant dangers. Calls for improved safety measures and stricter regulations around well construction grew louder in the aftermath of Rayhan's death. As Rayhan was laid to rest, the prayers of millions followed him. His story will not be forgotten, and his memory will live on as a symbol of resilience and the enduring bonds that unite us all. What does it feel like to crawl through the dark, cold depths of a cave where every twist and turn could be your last? What if the narrow passage you squeeze into suddenly becomes your prison with no way to turn back? In this video, we uncover the chilling, true story of a daring scoutmaster, Don Weltner, who entered Crooked Swamp Cave for a simple game of hide-and-seek and never came out alive. What went so terribly wrong deep beneath the earth? As rescuers raced against time to save him, the cave itself seemed to fight back. Let's unravel the mystery of one of New Jersey's most tragic cave explorations. You will never look at caves the same way again. Welcome to the fascinating world of Crooked Swamp Cave, New Jersey's longest and deepest cave. Tucked away in Lafayette, New Jersey, this cave offers a thrilling journey beneath the Earth's surface. It stretches over 1,250 feet, winding through narrow limestone passageways that have been shaped by natural springs over thousands of years. The cave lies within a vast marsh complex known as Crooked Swamp, part of the Pollenskill River headwaters, which serves as a critical habitat for diverse plant and animal species, including the endangered bog turtle and the state-threatened long-tail salamander. The Crooked Swamp marshland is teeming with life. It's not just the cave that draws attention, but the entire ecosystem surrounding it. Visitors may spot a great blue heron rookery, which is home to many of these majestic birds. Above ground, the swamp is fed by numerous springs, and below, these same waters have been working slowly but steadily, dissolving the limestone bedrock to create the intricate cave system we see today. This process is known as karst formation, a geological phenomenon where water erodes soluble rock, creating underground caves and sinkholes. Crooked Swamp Cave is more than just a natural wonder. It is an adventurous challenge for experienced cave explorers, or splunkers. This cave is narrow and can be quite demanding, requiring both skill and courage. If you've ever dreamed of squeezing through dark passages and marveling at underground formations, this cave offers an experience like no other. However, it is not for the faint of heart. Spelunkophobia, the fear of caves, might keep some people above ground. And it is worth noting that the darkness of the cave can intensify nyctophobia, which is the fear of the dark. In fact, exploring Crooked Swamp Cave is so challenging that access is strictly controlled. Visitors who want to explore its hidden depths must first contact the New Jersey Cave Conservancy to arrange a guided tour. These tours are only available to those with prior splunking experience, and it is highly recommended to join a recognized caving organization. Safety is a top priority, and strict guidelines ensure that exploration remains as safe as possible. The land surrounding the cave was donated to the New Jersey Natural Lands Trust, and the cave is now managed with the help of the New Jersey Cave Conservancy. Today, Crooked Swamp Cave remains an important geological and ecological treasure. It showcases the slow power of nature's forces and the delicate balance between adventure and conservation. Public access is limited to protect both the cave and the people exploring it. But for those who are qualified, it offers a once-in-a-lifetime experience. On Saturday, March 27, 1982, a group of excited Boy Scouts from Troop 116 in Millstone Township, New Jersey, set out on an exciting adventure to Crooked Swamp Cave in Sussex County. This trip was not just a fun outing, it was a chance to explore the longest cave in the state. The Scouts were excited and ready to experience the dark, winding passages of the famous cave. Their caving guide was Jim Ewan,
a highly experienced caver with over 30 years of exploring caves. However, on this particular day, Ewan wasn't feeling well because he had a bad cold. As a result, he stayed outside the cave to supervise from a distance. Despite this setback, the group felt confident because they were being led by Donald G. Weltner, a 48-year-old New Jersey state trooper and the bus driver for the trip. Although Weltner had limited caving experience, he had only explored Chauffeur's Cave in Pennsylvania before, he was in excellent physical shape. He was 5 foot 11 inches tall, he weighed 160 pounds, and he was known for his strength and dedication. Before entering the cave, the group gathered to review maps and talk about the cave's layout. They discussed areas that could be tricky or dangerous and planned how to avoid them. This was an important step because Crooked Swamp Cave is known for its narrow, twisting passages. The group included 16 scouts, aged 11 to 16, and about half of them had caving experience from exploring Chauffeur's Cave. 2 other adults also joined the group, but they had no experience with caving. Nevertheless, everyone was excited as they prepared to enter the cave, unaware of the challenges and surprises that awaited them underground. This trip was meant to be a thrilling exploration of one of New Jersey's hidden treasures, and the scouts were ready for an unforgettable adventure. Weltner dressed in a long-sleeve shirt, pants, and rubber-soled boots. Weltner was ready for an exciting day of exploration. His helmet had a chin strap, but unlike most experienced cavers, he didn't have a mounted light. Instead, he carried only a handheld flashlight as his main source of light. Nevertheless, the group was prepared for adventure, unaware of the dangerous turn that their day would soon take. The cave itself is a maze of narrow passages and sharp, jagged walls. There are 7 entrances, but only 6 are accessible. The cave's layout is like a horizontal web of tight crawlways lying just a few feet beneath the surface. Some of the passages are so narrow and uneven that navigating between entrances is nearly impossible. The cold, damp air inside the cave made it even more difficult. Though the cave's usual temperature hovers at around 55 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit, it felt much colder due to cool weather and the constant movement of air through the shallow passages. After a morning of exploration, the group gathered outside the cave for lunch. Spirits were high as someone proposed a game to make the day even more thrilling. A manhunt inside the cave, with ice cream as the prize. 3 scouts volunteered to enter first, choosing any entrance they liked to hide and evade the others. After a 10-minute head start, the rest of the group, including Weltner, would follow in pursuit. It was supposed to be a fun, exciting challenge. Weltner entered the cave with his 2 sons and another scout. They chose an entrance near Tree Root Cave, a part of the cave system that was marked on the map by dotted lines, meaning it was only partially explored or known to be dangerous. Despite knowing this, Weltner decided to push ahead and try to navigate the passage. At around 3 p.m., something went terribly wrong. Weltner entered a narrow, body-sized crevice. The passage was shaped like a keyhole, slightly wider at the top with a narrow slot at the bottom. As he attempted to squeeze through, he slipped off a small ledge and became wedged at the bottom of the narrow passage. The space was only about 7 to 8 inches wide and a couple of feet high. His head was tilted downward, and his feet pointed upwards, an extremely dangerous position. Now at first, Weltner did not admit he was stuck, perhaps thinking he could free himself. But soon it became clear that he was firmly wedged, unable to move forward or backward. His group tried to help, but the passage was so tight that reaching him was nearly impossible. Only a small person could reach him from the Tree Root Cave side, and even then it was difficult to get close enough to help. By 3:20 p.m., most of the other scouts had left the cave, cold and tired from the chilly air. One adult, who had been waiting outside, entered the cave and discovered the dire situation. Weltner was trapped, and the group quickly retrieved a rope to try to pull him free. They looped the rope around his feet and pulled with all of their strength, but it didn't work. Weltner remained stuck, wedged tightly in the narrow crevice. Time was running out,
and the cold was getting worse. By 4:50 p.m., one of the scouts managed to hold Weltner's feet, helping him move a little bit, but it wasn't enough. His pants got caught on the rocks and he was stuck again. Even worse, the cold was starting to affect him. He started to talk in a strange way, a sign of hypothermia. His body was getting colder, and his situation was getting more dangerous every minute. The group thought about trying to lever him up using a board, but they couldn't find anything suitable in the cave. Panic set in as they realized that they were running out of options. Weltner was slipping deeper into hypothermia, and the narrow, jagged passage seemed more like a trap with every passing second. The situation had become a terrifying race against time. As the day turned into night on March 27th, it became clear that Weltner, the 48-year-old scoutmaster stuck in Crooked Swamp Cave, was in serious trouble. At 4:45 p.m., as the situation became more serious, the group called for help. They contacted the Blue Ridge Rescue Squad and the National Cave Rescue Commission, or NCRC. The New Jersey State Police, worried about their fellow officer, quickly gathered and arrived in full force. Even though many people were trying to help, it was clear that freeing Weltner would be difficult. By 7:30 p.m., Weltner was starting to lose his ability to think clearly. He was talking in a strange way, a sign that he was getting very cold. The rescuers knew that keeping him warm was the only way to save him. They tried everything. Hot water bottles, heat packs, and a wet sheet were placed near him. But the cold stone of the cave took away the warmth quickly. They brought a small electric heater and a hot air generator, but even these couldn't keep him warm for long. Each passing hour became more critical. Rescuers battled the cold and fatigue, knowing that they were racing against time to save a man whose life was hanging by a thread. Despite all their efforts, by 1 a.m. on Sunday, it had become painfully clear that nothing was working. The cold, damp air of the cave was relentless. Weltner's body temperature continued to drop, and his condition worsened. At 3 a.m., after many hours of trying to free him, there was no sign of life from Weltner. Rescuers were hopeful, but they were losing the battle against the cold cave. By 6 a.m., one rescuer got close enough to feel a little warmth near Weltner's thigh. This meant that he was still alive, but just barely. Desperation set in, and the rescuers decided to take drastic action. They realized that ordinary methods of extraction would not work. So at 6 a.m., they received the go-ahead to use extraordinary means. Their plan was to drill a 20-foot shaft straight down into the cave, aiming to reach a spot just 2 feet from where Weltner was trapped. Time was short, and this was their last chance to save him. For 12 grueling hours, the drilling continued. The sound of machinery echoed through the cave and the surrounding woods as the rescuers worked tirelessly. But when the shaft finally broke through, they discovered that they had missed the correct spot by 10 to 12 feet. The crushing disappointment was felt by everyone. Between 6:30 p.m. on Sunday and midnight on Monday, cavers worked frantically to enlarge the passage leading from the new shaft to Weltner. They used jackhammers, hydraulic rock splitters, and even explosives in a desperate bid to reach him. Each blast, each strike sent shockwaves through the ground, but they made little progress. The clock was ticking, and hope was fading. Finally, by Monday evening, rescuers managed to fit a harness around Weltner's chest. They pulled with all their might, moving him a mere 2 feet closer to the shaft. But it wasn't enough. He was still stuck, and further attempts proved fruitless. At midnight, the heartbreaking decision was made. The only way to retrieve Weltner's body was through quarrying, meaning removing the surrounding rock piece by piece. At 2 a.m. on Tuesday, the quarrying began. It was a grim task. Blasting, backhoe work, and drilling continued throughout the day and into the evening. The rescuers pushed through exhaustion, knowing that their mission had now shifted from rescue to recovery. Tragically, as they worked to free Weltner's body, he suffered numerous post-mortem injuries from the heavy equipment. Finally,
At 11:40 p.m. on Tuesday, after 81 hours of relentless effort, Don Weltner's body was recovered. His death marked the end of one of the most grueling cave rescue attempts in New Jersey's history. Dr. Lucien Fletcher from Newton Memorial Hospital officially pronounced him dead at 10:45 p.m., and his body was taken to the hospital for an autopsy. When Don Weltner's body was finally removed from the cave, rescuers discovered the heartbreaking reason that he couldn't be freed earlier. A piece of rock behind his right hip had acted like a keystone, locking him in place. Even after quarrying away most of the rock around him, a come-along tool was still needed to fully release him. In hindsight, it became clear that all previous attempts to pull him free were doomed from the start. Efforts to keep Weltner warm were made, but they were not enough. The focus had been on freeing him quickly, which seemed like the right decision at the time. However, some now believe that if keeping him warm had been the main priority, perhaps with a powerful hot air blower, he might have survived longer. This thought is not meant to criticize the rescuers, who worked tirelessly, but rather to highlight lessons for future rescues. Throughout the rescue, the local community came together to support the rescue teams. Meals were prepared at the town's only firehouse and brought to the site 3 times a day. Residents donated eggs, meat, and vegetables, hoping to provide comfort to the exhausted rescuers who worked tirelessly to save a man trapped beneath the earth. Ultimately, the responsibility for the accident rested with Weltner himself. He was known to be adventurous and fearless, often taking on challenges that others avoided. He loved the thrill of pushing through tight, difficult spaces. Several factors likely contributed to his decision that day. The excitement of the hide-and-seek game, a desire to prove himself after failing to get through a narrow passage earlier, and perhaps a misunderstanding about how dangerous the crawl really was. This tragedy also highlights an important point about caving. Caution and good judgment must always come first. Caving is not a game, and pushing beyond one's limits can be deadly. What goes into a cave does not always come back out. Instead of teaching daring, the focus should be on teaching safety, patience, and knowing when to turn back. Don Weltner's story is a painful reminder of the risks involved in exploring the underground world. It is a lesson in bravery, but also in the importance of knowing our limits. He was laid to rest at St. Rose of Lima Cemetery in Freehold Township, New Jersey. But his memory serves as a lasting reminder of the dangers and responsibilities that come with cave exploration. What happens when an adventure into the depths of the earth takes a deadly turn? Imagine descending into the cold, dark depths of a cave only to realize that you're not prepared for the dangers waiting below. One wrong decision, one slip, and everything changes. In this video, we're going to be uncovering the chilling story of 2 explorers, one inexperienced and one skilled, who faced a life-threatening disaster inside a remote cave. A terrifying fall, painful injuries, and a desperate fight to escape the depths. Will they make it out alive? Stay tuned as we reveal the mystery and the lessons learned from this harrowing journey. Welcome to Lost Cave, a fascinating limestone cave located near the city of Carlsbad, New Mexico. This cave is known for its unique features and challenging exploration opportunities, making it a favorite spot for experienced cavers. It has a rich history and plays an important role in preserving both biological and historical resources. The cave is managed in partnership by the Bureau of Land Management, also known as BLM, and the Pecos Valley Grotto, a group within the National Speleological Society. Due to the sensitive nature of the cave's environment, all visits must be guided by a trained trip leader from this grotto. This ensures that the delicate ecosystem and historical artifacts within the cave remain protected while allowing people to explore its wonders responsibly. Lost Cave has 2 main rooms filled with breakdown, which are large rocks and debris that have fallen from the ceiling over time.
These rooms connect to various side passages, creating an exciting maze-like system for explorers to navigate. The cave is mostly horizontal, meaning that you won't need to climb steep walls inside. However, getting into the cave is an adventure on its own. The entrance is located just a few feet off the road, but it's quite narrow, about the width of a person's shoulders. To access the cave, you'll need to descend a 15-foot ladder into the entrance passage. Exploring Lost Cave requires a bit of physical effort. Once inside, you'll find yourself hiking through rough and uneven terrain. Some areas are narrow, requiring you to squat, crawl, or even climb through tight spaces. At certain points, you might encounter knee to thigh-deep water, which adds to the challenge. Carrying gear is also a must, as you'll need proper equipment to safely navigate the cave's interior. This cave has also been the site of some interesting scientific studies. In 1989, it was used for an isolation study, adding to its unique history. Today, it's a destination for those who love adventure and are ready to take on the challenge of exploring a remote and wild underground world. On a cold and quiet day in 1980, on the 23rd of November, two friends, Butch Hendricks, 37, and Charles Bruce, set out on what they thought would be an exciting adventure. Their destination was Lost Cave, a limestone cave in Eddy County, New Mexico. The two planned to spend the day taking photographs inside the cave, capturing its hidden beauty. Both men were outdoor enthusiasts, but their experience levels differed significantly when it came to caving techniques. Butch Hendricks, a strong and adventurous man, had some experience with outdoor activities, but he was not a seasoned caver. His approach to descending pits was simple but risky. He preferred to climb down hand over hand. This technique requires immense upper body strength, but it also lacks the safety of proper climbing gear. Charles Bruce, on the other hand, was more experienced in caving and had used modern equipment like rappelling systems in order to navigate vertical drops. The men decided to share climbing gear in order to minimize the weight of their load. Bruce brought along a carabiner brake bar setup, a commonly used and safe technique for rappelling. Before entering the cave, Bruce demonstrated how to use the equipment to Hendricks. However, it became clear that Hendricks was uncomfortable and unsure about this unfamiliar method. Nervous and hesitant, he decided to stick with what he knew, descending hand over hand, despite being warned about the dangers. Another issue arose during their preparation. Bruce's chest harness, an essential piece of gear for ascending vertical sections, did not fit Hendricks. This meant that Hendricks would have to rely on foot-attached ascenders and his upper body strength in order to climb back up. Well, despite these challenges, the two men decided to proceed with their trip. The weather outside was cold but clear, with a light breeze carrying the chill of late November. Inside the cave, the temperature was cooler and damp, as caves often maintain a constant environment. The 30-foot entrance drop loomed ahead of them, a vertical shaft that marked the beginning of their journey. Bruce, confident in his skills, secured the rope and used his carabiner brake bar system in order to rappel down smoothly. Once at the bottom, he waited for Hendricks to follow. Hendricks grabbed the rope, and he began his descent using his hand-over-hand method. At first, everything seemed fine, but halfway down, Hendricks started to lose his grip. The rope, slippery and thin, burned against his hands as he struggled to hold on. His arms began to tire, and panic set in. Suddenly, he slipped, and the rope slid rapidly through his hands. With no way to stop himself, Hendricks fell the rest of the way, landing hard on the rocky cave floor. The fall was devastating. Hendricks landed on his feet, but the force of the impact was overwhelming, sending a jolt of pain through his entire body. His back felt like it had been crushed, and he couldn't stand upright. His hands were in even worse shape, burned raw from the rope. The skin on his palms were peeled and blistered, throbbing with unbearable pain. His fingers were stiff, shaking uncontrollably as if they'd forgotten how to move. Each breath was shallow and labored, his body refusing to cooperate. Unable to bear the pain any longer, Hendricks slowly lowered himself down to the cold, hard cave floor. The jagged rocks beneath him dug into his back, but it was the only way he could find even a shred of relief. Every small movement sent sharp stabs of agony through his back, and his hands hung limply at his sides, useless and burning like fire. Bruce, who had been waiting at the bottom, ran to his friend as soon as he fell down. His heart was beating fast as he knelt beside Hendricks and quickly checked him over. It was obvious that Hendricks was seriously injured. The burns on his hands were very bad. His back injury was clearly serious, and there was now no way that he could climb back up the 30-foot entrance. The situation was dire. Without a chest harness, Hendricks wouldn't be able to ascend the vertical shaft. Even with his upper body strength, his injuries made it impossible. Bruce's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. Time was against them. The longer Hendricks stayed in the cold, damp cave, the worse his condition would get. Bruce made a quick decision. He helped prop Hendricks up slightly and then wrapped him in warm clothing to protect him from the cold. He gave him water, speaking words of reassurance even as dread gripped his own heart. Hendricks' face was pale, his breathing shallow, and Bruce knew that he had to act fast. "I'll be back as soon as I can," Bruce promised, his voice steady despite the fear he felt. "Stay here, keep drinking water, and try to stay warm." With that, Bruce scrambled back up the rope, leaving his injured friend alone in the silent, dark depths of Lost Cave. Bruce climbed up the rope as quickly as he could, his hands gripping tightly as he pulled himself up higher. His heart pounded, not just from the effort, but from the fear gnawing at him. He knew that he was leaving Hendricks behind in a terrible state, but there was no other choice. Finally, he reached the surface, pulling himself out into the cold evening air. For a brief moment, he paused, catching his breath, before rushing off to find help. Meanwhile, deep inside the cave, Hendricks lay on the wet, rocky floor. The cold of the cave seemed to surround him, going deep into his bones. Because he wasn't moving to stay warm, his body started to shake uncontrollably. The cold felt like it was penetrating his skin, making every bit of pain and injury feel worse. He was breathing shallowly and unevenly, and the pain in his back got much worse every time he tried to take a deep breath. His hands, which were swollen and covered in blisters from the burns, throbbed with every small movement, sending sharp waves of pain up his arms. The darkness felt suffocating, and the silence pressed down on him like a heavy weight. Above ground, Bruce ran as fast as he could through the night, his mind filled with worry. He knew that there wasn't much time. Hendricks was injured and in a dangerous situation, and the cold of the cave would only make things worse. Bruce arrived at the house of a friend who also went caving and quickly explained what had happened. His friend, who was also an experienced caver, immediately understood how urgent the situation was. But when Bruce asked to borrow a chest harness, a special piece of equipment that's used for climbing, someone else had already borrowed it. The chest harness was crucial for Hendricks to climb out of the vertical shaft. Without it, rescue would be almost impossible. But Bruce wasn't ready to give up. The two men quickly gathered whatever equipment they could find, hoping to improvise a solution. Together, they hurried back to the cave. The short journey felt painfully long, each step weighed down by the thought of Hendricks waiting in pain and cold below ground. Bruce's heart raced, imagining what his friend must be going through. Every second felt like a lifetime, but Bruce pushed himself to move faster. When they arrived at the cave entrance, Bruce and his friend quickly made a plan. They would use Bruce's seat harness as a makeshift chest harness for Hendricks. It wasn't ideal, and it would take some careful adjustments, but it was the only option they had. With no time to spare, Bruce grabbed the gear and prepared to descend back into the darkness to save his friend. When they reached the cave, Bruce descended the 30-foot drop once again to rejoin Hendricks. By this time, Hendricks was weak and in severe pain. His hands were wrapped in makeshift bandages, but the burns were worsening, and his back injury left him unable to sit up for any long period of time. The cold air had taken a toll on him, and he shivered uncontrollably despite the extra clothing that Bruce had left for him earlier. Bruce carefully helped Hendricks put on the makeshift chest harness that they had made. It was a slow and very painful process, as every movement caused Hendricks to grimace in pain. Once the harness was on securely, the difficult job of getting Hendricks out of the cave began. Bruce guided Hendricks as he attached himself to the rope and used the foot ascenders to climb. Hendricks had to rely on his legs, as his burned hands were just too damaged to grip the rope effectively. Bruce stayed close, offering support and encouragement every step of the way. The ascent was grueling, with Hendricks pausing frequently in order to catch his breath and push through the pain. Finally, after several hours, Hendricks reached the surface. Extremely tired and in terrible pain, he collapsed onto the ground. The cold night air stung his burned hands, but he was so relieved to be out of the cave. Bruce and his friend quickly took him to his home, where they gave him first aid before taking him to the hospital. At the hospital, Hendricks was treated for severe rope burns and a back injury. The doctors commended his resilience, but they also emphasized how lucky he was to have avoided more serious injuries during the fall. The ordeal left a lasting impression on both Hendricks and Bruce. The story of Butch Hendricks and Charles Bruce's adventure in Lost Cave is a tale of survival, resilience, and the unwavering determination to help a friend in need. It highlights the dangers of caving and the importance of respecting the challenges that come with exploring the underground world. In the end, Bruce realized that neither of them had been using safe methods during the trip. Looking back, he felt that he should have insisted on using proper gear and techniques, or even refused to enter the cave altogether. He understood how hard it is to make such a decision, knowing that it could offend someone who insists on their own way, but safety always has to come first. Hendricks was fortunate to have been with someone who knew the right techniques and had the proper equipment to carry out a rescue. Without those, the situation could have ended much worse. The lesson from this experience is clear. If you don't have the right equipment, or are unsure about the safety of a situation, it is always better to step back and prepare properly. Caving can be an incredible adventure, but it can also be dangerous. Taking the time to ensure that everyone is safe and ready is the most important part of any trip.
Would you enter a cave where over 13 people have vanished and were never found? If you go in, you could be next. This is what happened to 19-year-old Subhash Chandran, who planned to visit the Guna cave with 8 friends. Their adventure quickly turned into a nightmare when Subhash fell into the depths of the cave where 13 others had met their end. None ever recovered. Now, you might be wondering, if the cave is so dangerous, why were they there? What mysteries lie within this deadly cave that has claimed so many lives? And most importantly, was Subhash saved? Let's find out. Subhash came to Kodai Canal in Tamil Nadu, India with his childhood friends. They were excited for a weekend filled with adventure, ready to create lasting memories together. The group, inseparable since childhood, was eager to explore the beautiful landscapes and hidden wonders of the area. Like every group of young men, they were full of energy and bravado, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. They laughed, shared stories, and planned their next escapade, unaware of the lurking dangers. As they set out to explore Guna Cave, their spirits were high, but little did they know that this adventure would take a perilous turn, testing their friendship and resilience in unimaginable ways. India is home to more than 1,500 caves, many of which are famous for their religious significance and ancient art. While these caves vary in size, most are not very deep, typically ranging from 10 to 30 meters in height. When compared to average caves around the world, which can often reach much greater depths, sometimes even of 100 meters, Indian caves tend to be more accessible,
and are often explored for their historical and cultural value rather than extreme geological features. But all of this is different when it comes to Guna Cave. At an altitude of 2,200 meters, the Guna Caves are a breathtaking sight, surrounded by thick greenery that sparks curiosity and wonder. These caves are located near the beautiful Pillar Rocks in Kodai Canal. With a history that is both captivating and intriguing, these caves have captured the imagination of many. The locals also believe that these caves are connected to ancient Hindu stories and legends. Many think the caves have spiritual meaning, which adds to their mystery. Visitors often hear tales of gods and old events linked to this special place. However, there are also frightening myths that cast a shadow over its beauty. Some locals say that the spirits of those who have died in the caves still roam the dark passages, searching for peace or even revenge. Others share stories of strange sounds echoing through the chambers at night, whispers that chill the air, and footsteps that seem to follow you in the dark. These unsettling tales not only make Guna Cave more intriguing, but also bring a sense of fear, making it a captivating yet anxiety-inducing spot for everyone who dares to explore its depths. More recently, over 100,000 people visited the cave in February of 2024 alone. The Guna Caves, with their history, were first brought to light by British officer B.S. Ward in 1821. He was the one who named these caves as Devil's Kitchen, a title that hints at the cave's mysterious and intriguing nature. This name reflects not just how the caves look, but also the secrets hidden inside. The darkness around the cave adds to the mystery, leaving visitors wondering what is inside these caves, and what stories are waiting to be found in this fascinating place. The rocky ground and steep cliffs hid risks, with holes covered by leaves that could easily drop anyone. The cave is believed to go much deeper than 900 feet, with some saying that it might even be as deep as 3,000 feet, creating a complex network of passages that can be risky for those who explore too far. Since their discovery, the Guna Caves have led to the deaths of over 13 people, none of whom have even been recovered. For many years, the caves faded from public memory, lost in time and overshadowed by other attractions. But the time of the 1990s marked a turning point for Guna Caves. They were rediscovered and once again captured the interest of travelers and locals alike. This revival was largely due to the 1991 film Guna, starring the famous actor Kamal Hassan. The film showcased the stunning landscapes and unique features of the caves, bringing them back into the spotlight and sparking curiosity about this hidden place. One of the most famous cases was when the nephew of a central minister fell into the caves in 1996 and could not be rescued. Despite all the power and resources available, the rescue teams were unable to save him, or even recover his body because no one knew where the cave ended. This left many questions about the depth and darkness of the caves, adding to the mystery and danger surrounding this beautiful but treacherous place. Due to multiple incidents like this, safety measures were put in place around the Guna Caves. Metal railings and barriers were installed to help keep visitors safe and prevent accidents. However, even with these safety measures, the caves are still a place of mystery and danger. The depths are unknown, and the darkness can be scary. This background set the stage for what would happen next. On September 3rd, 2006, Subhash, along with his 9 friends, Sujit, Abhilash, Suji John, Anil Joseph, Krishna Kumar, Sumesh, Siksan John, Siju David, and Prasad P.S. all set off on an exciting journey to the Guna Caves. Inspired by the film's story, they wanted to explore the beautiful and mysterious caves. But, like many others, they didn't fully understand the dangers and risks involved. Their excitement to live an adventure, as shown in the film, put their lives at risk. The entry to the Guna Caves had already been blocked by the Forest Department to prevent anyone from entering. Clear signs were posted to warn visitors to stay safe, but these friends managed to bypass the barriers by sneaking through a gap in the fencing. Although they didn't understand Tamil, the local language spoken in Tamil Nadu, India, they recognized the signs were warnings but chose to proceed anyway, unaware of the full danger that awaited them. Then, in a sudden moment of chaos, Subhash lost his footing on the slick rocks and slipped,
plummeting into a dark, deep part of the cave. At that moment, everything in the cave went quiet. His friends were in shock, and their laughter turned into a moment of worry for their friend. Now, when a person falls into a cave from that height, the results can be very serious and even life-threatening. Studies show that falls from heights of just 10 feet can lead to serious injuries like broken bones, concussions, and head injuries. In caves, where the ground is often uneven and filled with sharp rocks, the risk of getting hurt is even higher, making every foot of height potentially dangerous. For example, a fall of about 30 feet can lead to severe injuries such as spinal damage, internal bleeding, or serious brain injuries, which can be deadly without quick medical help. The tight spaces in caves make things worse. Their narrow paths and sharp edges can increase the risk of injury when someone falls. Moreover, caves are typically dark, which can disorient anyone who has fallen. Limited visibility makes it difficult to assess injuries or find a way out. The air quality can also be poor, with reduced oxygen levels in the deeper parts, adding to the sense of panic and making it harder for someone to stay calm after a fall. In that moment of worry, a frightening thought crossed their minds. What was happening to Subhash in the darkness below? They rushed to the edge, calling out Subhash's name, but the only reply was the echo of their voices. Fear gripped them as they realized that he might have died from the fall. Panic set in, and a few of Subhash's friends quickly ran to find help. But when these young boys reached the locals, they found out that nobody wanted to risk their lives by going into a cave that has no clue of estimated height. Everyone knew how risky it could be, and the deaths that had happened before in this cursed cave. The boys felt helpless. Realizing that they needed assistance, they decided to go to the police station to ask for help, hoping the authorities could find a way to somehow rescue Subhash. The police officers knew that the area was fenced off and that entering was not allowed. They were aware that many people had already lost their lives in the cave, and none had ever even made it out. Because of this, they didn't take the report seriously and assumed that Subhash must have been dead by now. However, to keep up with the report, they decided to do a quick check at the site of the incident. When the police arrived at the cave, Subhash's friends were very anxious. They explained what had happened, and they desperately asked the officers to save their friend. Just then, one of the friends who was standing close to the incident site and was calling Subhash's name continuously claimed that he heard Subhash shouting for help from deep inside the cave. He urged the officers and his friends to listen closely, hoping that they would take his words seriously and do something. The officers heard the call for help and exchanged worried looks, feeling pulled between their doubts and the urgency in Subhash's call. Realizing that the situation might be more serious than they first thought, they agreed to take a closer look. The rest of the friends in the group held on to hope, believing that Subhash would make it out alive, and they all prayed that help would come in time. The police didn't have any special equipment or experience for situations like this. Many news reports claimed that the police showed little interest because of the previous incidents that had happened in the cave, and they were clearly not willing to risk their life to save someone who had fallen into the devil's kitchen. With each passing moment, Subhash's friends felt a growing mix of fear and frustration. They knew that they had to act quickly. Time was slipping away, and the darkness below was full of unknown dangers. The officers told Subhash's friends that they believed that it was too dangerous and that rescuing someone would be too risky. When the boys saw this lack of interest from the police authorities, it left them feeling even more worried, as all they wanted to do was everything possible to save Subhash. Right after the police authorities showed no interest in helping, Subhash's friends contacted the fire services and the forest department for help. They explained all the details of the incident and urgently asked them to start a rescue mission as soon as possible. Rescue operation. As the fire and forest department vehicles rolled in, whispers spread through the crowd, and the incident quickly became the talk of the town. Everyone was worried about Subhash and hoped that he would be found safe. With the sun setting, the shadows grew longer, making the cave seem even more scary. The darkness made it hard to see, and no one knew how deep the cave really was, or where it led. Tension filled the air as everyone waited anxiously for the rescue team to take action. The biggest question on everyone's mind was, how were the rescue teams going to get Subhash out? Just like the police, the rescue officers were also nervous about going into a cave that was completely dark and had no signs of life. They worried that even if they threw a long rope into the darkness, it might not help. After all, no one had ever come back alive from that depth. The uncertainty made everyone anxious, and doubts filled the air. As they talked about their options, it became clear that this rescue would be difficult, and they were clearly running out of time. As minutes turned into agonizing hours, and with no hope in sight, Seju David made a life-changing decision. He would descend into the abyss himself. The officials quickly said no, explaining that he didn't have any professional training. They worried that if even the trained officers were hesitating, they still couldn't risk another person's life. However, as time passed and none of the officers agreed to go down, they realized that they had no choice. Seju David was determined, and despite their concerns, they had to let him go into the cave, hoping for the best. They attached a 50-foot rope to David and equipped him with lights, knowing that this was no ordinary cave. Slowly, he began his descent, 6 officers holding the rope tightly for safety. As he went deeper, he looked around, but he saw no one. The silence was unnerving, and the absence of Subhash's voice made him panic more. Each moment felt like an eternity as he called out for Subhash, but there was no answer. When he reached the end of the rope, he quickly asked the officers up above for another one, desperate to go further into the darkness. His determination to find his childhood friend pushed him onward. Even as uncertainty hung heavily in the air, he had to keep searching, hoping to bring Subhash back to safety. But the officers said no to David's request, unsure of where another 50-foot rope might lead. They told him to come back right away because they were worried. David shouted back, saying that he would either die down there or find his friend, but he wouldn't come back without him. Time slipped away as the darkness grew thicker around him. The officers looked at each other, feeling the pressure of his desperation. Just as the last bit of light faded, they realized that they had to do something. In a quick moment of decision, they rushed to prepare another rope. The tension was high as they tied it off, knowing that this was David's last chance. David's heart raced as he felt the new rope come down, each second stretching on as he braced himself for the unknown. Would he find his friend before it was too late? After going about 80 feet down, he turned on his flashlight and swept the beam across the rocky walls. Suddenly, his heart sank as he spotted a figure lying on the ground. It was Subhash, and he looked badly hurt. Panic rushed through David as he hurried closer, his mind racing with worry. Was his friend okay? As he knelt beside Subhash, the dim light showed his friend's pale face and the bruises on his body. David felt the weight of time pressing down on him. He had to act fast. He quickly attached the rope around Subhash and called the officers to pull them up. Everyone was in shock as they all held the rope tightly, using all of their strength to lift both of them out of the cave. Once they reached the surface, it was clear that Subhash's condition was very serious. Without wasting any time, they rushed him to the hospital, their hearts racing with worry. The doctors worked quickly, and, thankfully, Subhash was saved. Relief washed over everyone as they realized that their friend was going to be okay, and gratitude filled the air for David's brave actions. Subhash became the only person ever to be rescued from Guna Caves, raising a haunting question. Had previous rescuers exhibited such unwavering courage, could they have changed the fate of the 13 who perished? David's bravery is a powerful reminder of what true friendship looks like. His determination to help a friend in need inspires us all to reflect on the strength of our bonds and the lengths we would go to for those we care about. Now, we want to hear from you. Would you ever visit the Guna Caves after learning about this story? In the heart of northern Alabama lies Stevens Gap Cave. 2 friends, both soldiers, ventured into this mysterious cave for some adventure. As they descended into the darkness, eager to explore the depths below, something went terribly wrong. A sudden mishap fell one of them down into the abyss. What followed was a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Stay with us as we unravel the chilling story of their fateful journey into Stevens Gap Cave. Hidden away in the peaceful countryside of northern Alabama, Stevens Gap Cave is a special place located near the small town of Woodville. This beautiful cave, found on private property, is in the heart of Jackson County and is part of the Southeastern Cave Conservancy's (SCCI) efforts to protect and preserve the natural wonders of the region. Even though it's becoming more popular, the cave is still a bit secret, with only a small, simple sign marking its entrance. As you drive down the quiet road, keep your eyes open for a small gate that shows the start of your adventure. Beyond this gate, a gravel parking area with a picnic table waits for you, offering a short moment of rest before you start your journey into one of the Southeast's most loved caves. Stevens Gap Cave is renowned for its breathtaking 143 feet pit, which has become a favorite among cavers. The cave also features a massive walk-in entrance that draws hikers, photographers, and outdoor enthusiasts from all over. The view from the walk-in passage is simply stunning, with the pit offering one of the most photographed wild cave scenes in North America. The light filtering through the keyhole in the cave's ceiling creates a mesmerizing beam that illuminates the natural pedestal below, offering a scene of unparalleled beauty. It's no wonder that this cave is a popular spot for both amateur and professional photographers, capturing the essence of nature's artistry. The cave's main attraction, the entrance pit, is a challenge that only those with vertical climbing skills can conquer. Reaching the bottom requires special equipment and knowledge, as cavers must rappel down the steep drop and then climb back up the same rope to exit the cave. The descent is not for the weak, but for those who are experienced and prepared, it offers a thrilling and rewarding experience. For those without climbing expertise, the walk-in passage provides an equally impressive experience. This short but steep and sometimes slippery trail leads visitors to a viewpoint about 50 feet above the cave floor. Here, you can look down into the depths of the pit, marveling at its grandeur while taking in the surrounding beauty. However, caution is crucial. Footing can be uncertain, and the edge is not far away. One of the unique features of Stevens Gap is its dual entrances. Adventurers can choose to either walk in through the spacious, scenic passage or rappel down alongside a stunning waterfall. The presence of these two entrances makes the cave accessible to a wider range of visitors, whether they are seeking a leisurely hike or a more challenging caving experience. The walk-in entrance is especially popular for those who want to explore the cave without the need for ropes and harnesses. Whether you are an experienced caver looking for your next challenge or a nature enthusiast eager to witness the beauty of the cave, Stevens Gap offers an unforgettable experience. The combination of its dramatic pit, the enchanting light beams, and the natural splendor of the surrounding landscape make it a must-visit destination for anyone exploring the caves of the Southeast. As you plan your visit, remember to take all necessary precautions, respect the natural environment, and prepare yourself for an adventure that will leave you with memories to last a lifetime. Stevens Gap Cave, a stunning natural wonder located in northern Alabama, is known for its breathtaking beauty and challenging rappelling opportunities. But in 2019, on the evening of Saturday, July 6th, what should have been an exhilarating adventure turned into a heartbreaking tragedy. Two men, both U.S. Army soldiers stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, had traveled to this remote cave near Woodville for a day of exploration and rappelling. Unfortunately, one of them, 20-year-old Private First Class, PFC, Philip Wayne Whitehead Jr. and his fellow soldier, whose name has not been publicly disclosed, were both stationed at Fort Campbell, part of the 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault. They were close friends who shared a passion for adventure and the outdoors. Philip Wayne Whitehead, Jr. was more than just a soldier. He was a combat medic specialist with the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault. Originally from Deltona, Florida, Whitehead joined the U.S. Army in 2017, dedicating himself to a life of service. He arrived at Fort Campbell in 2018, where he quickly became known for his dedication, bravery, and commitment to his comrades. His awards and decorations included the National Defense Service Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Army Service Ribbon, and the Air Assault Badge. On that fateful day, they decided to take advantage of their off-duty time by visiting Stevens Gap Cave, one of the most popular caving destinations in the Southeast. The cave is well known among cavers for its 143-foot entrance pit and the Keyhole, a narrow vertical opening that leads to a steep drop into the cave. The Keyhole is a favorite spot for experienced cavers, offering a thrilling, rappelling experience that requires skill and precision. At approximately 6 p.m., the two men prepared to rappel down this challenging route. They were excited, ready to take on the challenge of descending more than 100 feet into the depths of the cave. For one of them, this was not his first time rappelling at Stephen's Gap. He had successfully descended the rope earlier in the day. But for Whitehead, this was his first attempt at the challenging drop. As Whitehead began his descent, something went terribly wrong. According to Jackson County Sheriff's Department Chief Deputy Rocky Harnan, Whitehead experienced an issue with his rope, causing him to fall nearly 100 feet to the cave floor below. The fall was catastrophic. Despite the best efforts of emergency responders who rushed to the scene, Whitehead was pronounced dead at the bottom of the pit. Chief Deputy Harnan described the incident as a sad situation, emphasizing that the two men had come to the cave simply to enjoy their day off. What was supposed to be a day of fun and adventure ended in unimaginable tragedy, leaving a young soldier's life cut short and his friend devastated. Whitehead's tragic death sent shockwaves through the military community, as well as among his friends and family. Major Martin Miners, Deputy Public Affairs Officer for the 101st Airborne Division, confirmed Whitehead's identity and expressed deep sorrow over the loss of such a promising young soldier. His death was a stark reminder of the inherent risks that come with not only military service, but also the adventurous spirit that leads so many to explore the wild and untamed parts of our world. The key hole at Stephen's Gap Cave is known for its beauty and its dangers. This was not the first fatality at this spot in 2019. Earlier in the year, on April 11th, another man, 25-year-old Juan Gerardo Cruces from Madison County, Alabama, also lost his life near the cave entrance. Cruces was reportedly walking alone near the entrance when he fell to his death. Following this incident, the Southeastern Cave Conservancy, which manages Stephen's Gap, suspended issuing permits for a week to investigate the accident and review safety measures. The keyhole offers a unique rappelling experience where cavers descend from the narrow opening to the pedestal below, a ledge that provides a striking view of the cave's interior. However, this route is only suitable for those with advanced caving skills. The drop is more than 100 feet, and any mistake can have fatal consequences. It is a place that demands respect, preparation, and the right equipment. Unfortunately, even with these precautions, accidents can happen, as was tragically demonstrated in the case of Whitehead. In the wake of Whitehead's death, local authorities and rescue teams were quick to respond. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office was assisted by several agencies, including Highlands Medical Center, the Scottsboro-Jackson County Rescue Squad, the Limrock-Aspel Fire Department, and the Huntsville Cave Rescue Unit. Despite their best efforts, nothing could be done to save Whitehead, and his body was recovered from the cave with great care and respect. The incident also highlighted the importance of following proper procedures when exploring caves like Stephen's Gap. According to Chief Deputy Harnan, spelunkers must obtain a permit and a security code to legally enter the cave. This permit is provided by the Southeastern Cave Conservancy, which manages over 170 caves across the Southeast. The Conservancy's primary goal is to protect these natural wonders while ensuring that visitors can enjoy them safely. However, it was unclear whether Whitehead and his friend had obtained the necessary permit before entering the cave that day. The loss of Philip Wayne Whitehead Jr. was deeply felt, not only by his fellow soldiers at Fort Campbell, but also by the entire community of cavers and outdoor enthusiasts. His death was a tragic reminder of the risks that come with the pursuit of adventure, and it underscored the need for caution, preparation, and respect for the natural world. As we honor the memory of this brave young soldier, may we also strive to ensure that such tragedies are prevented in the future, allowing others to explore and enjoy the beauty of our natural world safely. If you're planning to explore caves or other challenging environments, make sure you have the proper skills, equipment, and permits. Safety should always be your top priority. The natural world is full of incredible places to discover, but we must approach them with care and respect to avoid accidents and tragedies. Thank you for watching this video. We hope that Philip Whitehead's story has touched you and made you more aware of the risks and responsibilities that come with exploration. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more stories about the great outdoors. Share this video with others who might be inspired by the beauty of nature but also need to understand the importance of safety.